ready to start, or do I need to wait for anybody? Hello, everybody. Good evening. Could I just ask you to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everybody. In keeping with our tradition of trying to start meetings by celebrating the wonderful stuff that our students are involved in and their accomplishments, last month we had some students share some selections from their holiday concerts. There's another holiday this month, the Lunar New Year, and we have some students who are going to be performing. Last month I mentioned a little bit about Alan Wang, who was one of 2 students in his age group to represent the United States and Indonesia at a wushu competition. I know he'd like to start us out with a couple of words of his own. So Alan, would you like to take the microphone?
Great. Hi everyone, I'm Alan Huang. I'm a senior at Sasa High School, and today I'm here with my teammates at Sitan Taiji and Martial Arts to be demonstrating some martial arts for you. My teammates will be Alex Chen, Maggie Chen, Katie Yan, Victor Huang, and Ethan Yip, 3 of which are from Syosset and 2 of which are from Herix. So just a little bit about Chinese martial arts. The Chinese martial arts and wushu is a conglomerate of all the different styles and weapons and techniques that Chinese martial arts from all over the world or all over the country uses. And today we'll just be choosing a select few to show to you today. So the music and the performance that we'll be performing for you will be from a modified version of the performance we did at the Times Square ball drop we did for the 2022 New Year. I just want to give a big thanks to our coach, Coach Lin, for everything she's done and for us and for choreographing this and for just helping us do so much. So, yeah. Without further ado, enjoy.
Well, I know you'll all join me in expressing our appreciation for the artistry and the athleticism that we just witnessed, and thanks once again to our performers led by Alan and Coach Lin Lin. So. One other thing that we always do in January is we recognize the success of our fall athletes. So just as we've seen an incredible display of athleticism here, we're going to remark on some of the incredible athleticism of our Section 8 athletes. And I'm looking around for Mr. Scott Stuber, who's behind me, and is our athletic director, and he's going to make the announcements and the introductions. So, Mr. Stuber.
Good evening and thank you. It's truly an honor to recognize the tremendous accomplishments of these fine young athletes. But before I do, one of the things I'm most proud of is all 10 teams that are represented here, and one other team that they don't award all county in the fall season, but all 11 teams this past fall earned scholar athlete distinction. So it's a tremendous honor for our athletic program. Guys, keep sliding down. Another tremendous accomplishment. All 10 teams not only qualified for the playoffs, but 9 of these 10 teams made it to at least the semifinals, with 5 teams making the championships with 3 county champions. So it was really a great fall. So at this time, I'd like to recognize the all-county athletes for the 2022 boys badminton team. So gentlemen, step forward. We have 6 athletes, 4 that are here today. So the first, Josh Yu, was a 4-year varsity athlete who is extremely versatile, always stepped up in the big situations. Ryan Yu, step forward, Ryan. A 4-year varsity player, 2-time all-county selection, first team doubles and co-captain with tremendous skill and leadership all season long. Congratulations, Ryan. Tom Liu, a 2-year varsity player, 3rd doubles. His hard work paid off. He got better each day and helped the team advance to the semifinals. Congratulations, Tom. Hagen Liu couldn't be here with us, a 2-year varsity player and a 2-time all-county selection, 3rd doubles, a quiet, talented athlete who let his play do the talking for him. So congratulations, Hagen. Next up, Ashok Mutayala, a 4-year varsity player, a 3-time all-county selection, 2nd singles and co-captain, battled every match, and was always a positive influence on his teammates. Congratulations. Tremendous career. And finally, for boys badminton, Tristan Wong, a 4-year varsity player and a 2-time all-county selection, 1st singles and co-captain, the heart and soul of the team, as Coach said, and the program. Congratulations on a tremendous season. At this time, I'd like to introduce members of the boys volleyball team. We have 4 all-county recipients. 2 of them could be here today, so I'll quickly speak about the 2 who couldn't be here. Jalen Lee is a 3-year varsity outside hitter. His ability to swing often intimidated other teams and earned us numerous points throughout the year. Jalen always strived to be better, and we know this will continue on if he chooses to play college next year, which we hope he does. Jack Chow has been a 4-year varsity player, used as a middle hitter, outside hitter, and this year a right side hitter. Jack's optimistic attitude and leadership both on and off the court will be greatly missed next year. Angelo Fasano. Angelo, step forward. A 2-year varsity libero that switched to outside hitter this past year. He has been very versatile and is always willing to do whatever is best for the team. Angelo was constantly leading by example throughout his years in the program, and we wish him all the best next year in college. Congratulations, Angelo. Next up, Mikey Gaydon. Mikey was our starting libero as a junior this year. His 3rd year in varsity, Mikey is an excellent passer who frequently controls the court with his communication and positive energy. We are excited to have Mikey back next year for his senior season. Congratulations. And I just want to take this time to wish Coach Aquero all the best as he continues to recover. I know the athletes in the middle school and the high school miss him, and can't wait to see him back in the building. At this time, I'd like to introduce Coach Liz Christensen for our girls varsity volleyball team.
Good evening. I'm pleased to present Lexi Skralis. Lexi's a 3-year varsity starter and had, I guess you could only call it an incredible, amazing senior season. She was a Newsday Top 100 preseason player to watch, and in her coach's opinion, played as one of the top middle hitters in all of Nassau County this year. An incredible leader who has just grown and learned and brought the team along with her this year, leading us to our 4th consecutive county final. She received all county and all state honors, the first Syosset girls volleyball player to receive the honors as far back as we can tell, so it's an incredible accomplishment for Lexi. We're excited for Lexi. She'll be continuing her volleyball career at SUNY New Paltz next year.
And now I'd like to introduce Coach Shai Fisher, who coaches our girls tennis team, county finalist.
Good evening, everyone. The first team I'd like to call up is senior Olivia Tigerman and junior Manami Wakazono. Olivia wasn't able to make it tonight, so Manami, please step forward. This duo is the 2nd year in a row that they've achieved all-county status at our county tournament. They defeated numerous teams. Massapequa comes to mind, Great Neck North. Unfortunately, they ran into a Syosset team in the quarterfinals. But Manami and her partner still placed 8th out of over 40 teams that competed. Besides the all-county status, what stands out to me the most about Manami and Liv were, for the tournament, they were the sportsmanship award winners. And the one unique point that stood out was when the ball landed in, Manami had called it out, and then a second later realized she made a very bad call, overturned herself, and the coaches really noticed that. So sportsmanship goes a long way. All county, all sportsmanship, Manami and Olivia. Our second duo that earned all county is sophomore Sarah Gao and freshman Stephanie Marcheret. Stephanie, please stand forward. Sarah unfortunately couldn't make it tonight either. But Sarah was a 2-time All-County, and this was Stephanie's first time earning All-County. They defeated several teams, one from Roslyn. They actually had to beat a Syosset team. Then on the second day, they had to face a second Syosset team. And then they beat Hewlett. They wound up finishing 5th in the county. Also, personal accolades. All-County is phenomenal, but this duo is so young. Their growth throughout the year. They had some tough times, but they displayed some amazing resiliency, their ability to bounce back and advocate for themselves on the court. When you're playing those older seniors, it's always a little tougher. So awesome job this year, Sarah and Stephanie. Thank you.
Unfortunately, Coach Rourke couldn't be with us tonight. He had a death in the family. So I would like to recognize his all-county athlete, the backbone of his team, Mr. John Munoz. John, step forward. John was a fierce competitor on the gridiron and an inspirational leader on and off the field for the team. He will be sorely missed, and Coach wants to wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Congratulations. We had 2 young ladies on our girls soccer team, also county finalists, that could not be here with us today. So I'd just like to briefly mention Molly Alterac and Michaela Kemp are both juniors who were unable to be here. Molly earned all county honors, and Michaela earned all county, all Long Island, and all state honors. A tremendous accomplishment. So congratulations, ladies. And at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Coach Brett Waxer, who's the head coach of our boys varsity soccer program.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers, Central Administration, Athletic Director Scott Stuber, and the Board of Ed. It's truly, greatly appreciated for all the support that you give, not just to our coaches, but to the athletes and all our teams. And congratulations to all the athletes tonight for being recognized. The Braves soccer team is very fortunate to have two great young men being honored tonight. Both Benji Blair and Jack Pendrick received all county honors this season. Please step forward. Benji was the senior captain and a 2-year starter for the Braves. His dedication to the program will be greatly missed, but his positive impact he made on the team will always be something that lasts for years. Benji possesses great character and always was a leader by example. Jack is a sophomore who has been a starter on varsity since freshman and was Newsday's top 100 players to watch. In his 2 years with the program, Jack truly has taken the team to the next level. Jack has a mentality that he will not be outworked and plays always with the greatest passion. Thank you to both Benji and Jack. You truly represent what this team, the coaches, and Syosset stands for. It's truly an honor to coach such great young men. Thank you.
Once again, I'll be speaking on behalf of Coach Spiteri, who could not be here, and our girls cross-country team. So we have 7 young ladies who earned all county honors, individual performances. First, Yui Ashino. Yui, she is a senior and one of the most respected athletes on the team, a true competitor and a true leader. Congratulations. Julie Shaughnessy. Julie is a freshman who got better and better each day and each meet. She finished 7th overall at the county championships. Congratulations, Julie. Samantha Mayer. Samantha is a senior who ran her best race at the county championships to complete an excellent high school cross-country career. So congratulations. Melissa Teneri is a sophomore who inspires all around her to be the best by her positive attitude. Congratulations, Melissa. Rin Furukawa. Rin is a freshman who is extremely competitive, who's going to be a factor for years to come. Congratulations, Rin. Ashley Wong. Ashley is a sophomore who persevered through an early season injury and stepped up during the championship season to help us capture the county title. Congratulations. And Morgan Engel. Morgan is a senior who has been the most improved runner over the last 2 seasons, and she was our top finisher at the county championships. Congratulations, ladies. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Mr. Rich Caffiero. He's our head coach of our boys track and field program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stuber. Our cross-country team had 5 athletes earn all county honors. The top 25 win it on the particular day, so your performance on one moment, on one day, matters most for this postseason title. We did have the county champion this year, 4 years in the making. Individual county champion, qualified for the New York State meet as well. Everything runs through him on our whole team. You'll hear more from him in a little bit. But that's Jordan Altman. Congratulations, Jordan. Senior Joseph Angadi as a senior extraordinaire. Don't know if there's another achiever in Nassau County. Has worked his tail off to get to the top 25 and was in charge of our tight pack that helped us win the county championship. All County Joe Angadi. 9th grader Luis Cruz, the top 9th grade finisher at the county championships. He was our second man all year, started in that pack, and then had the guts to kind of take things on his own the second half of the race. Was top 10 at the county championships as a 9th grader, hopefully following in Jordan's footsteps. Congratulations, Luis. John Hernandez, senior John Hernandez, was a mid-distance runner who changed gears for us in cross-country. It took a little bit of convincing, and then he was hooked. Congratulations, All-County John Hernandez. Lastly, Jesse LeBolt, newcomer to the varsity. His massive in-season improvements really helped solidify our county championship, which we won by 2 points over Port Washington. It's as close as you can pretty much get. Without him, we don't win. Congratulations, Jesse.
To introduce our final group of individual all-county athletes, Coach Mike Cipollino. He's the head coach of our girls' varsity swimming and diving program.
Thank you very much. The girls' swimming and diving program, we were very fortunate to have 8 all-county recipients. Our first recipient, Rachel Hui, is an 8th grader, her first year on varsity. Stepped up big in a number of tight spots for us and helped to solidify some very important meet wins for us. Madison Lynn, another first-time varsity swimmer, massive improvement throughout the year, and also stepped up very big for us. Lenny So, another first-time varsity swimmer, freshman, qualified in 2 events for All County. Madison So, senior, qualified in 3 events, All County. And then joining us today, Rachel Chen. Rachel, this was her first year qualifying as an All County recipient. She has tremendous positive attitude and an incredible work ethic, which enabled her to make the improvement necessary for that honor this year. Junior Amelie Ang qualified as All County in 2 events. As a junior, she really stepped up as a leader, both in the pool and on the pool deck. Caroline Hugh, sophomore, qualified in 2 events, always reliable, always can count on her in the big moment to touch out the competition. Great job, Caroline. And junior Megan Hugh, qualified in 3 events, always reliable, and she was also, in addition to being all-county, the county champion in the 100 breaststroke. Great job, Megan.
Coach, can you hang on 1 second? So being a new athletic director, there's nothing better than when a coach tells you about a couple weeks, 2 weeks for your season, he's not coming back. So girls swimming and diving is a sport that it's both swimming and diving. And if you go to an athletic director meeting, there's a lot of fights because some schools don't have diving and they just don't want to dive because they don't have a place to dive. But we have diving and they do a great job. Luckily for us, Coach Cipollino stepped up and took on the role of coaching both the diving and swimming team, which is a very different sport. Although they're both in the pool, they're different. The team was county champions. Obviously, heard a lot of great success stories, but another great success story is that the writers for Newsday recognized Coach Cipollino as their Long Island Coach of the Year. So congratulations. Before I dismiss the athletes that are up on the stage, I want to thank everyone for a great fall season. We look for your continued support throughout the winter and into the spring. And I'm going to ask that if the members of the cross-country teams and the girls swimming and diving team remain on the stage. And I want to wish the rest of you a great night and go home and study. Thank you. You guys come back here. Oh, we'll take a picture. Take a picture? Oh, you got it? Okay. Ladies cross country team, you step down. And the boys and the swimming, stay on the stage. Yep. Okay, if I could ask the ladies, the 10 ladies, members of our girls cross-country team, if you could take a couple steps forward. To win a county title is a tremendous accomplishment. I showed up here in July 1, and these girls were out there every day on their own, working out as a team, individually. I know that they're very happy that we have lights outside on the track, because they will be probably out there until the lights go off in the future. But Coach wanted me to say a couple brief things about the team, and I also want to introduce Giovanna Engel. Giovanna, take a step forward. Ann Zhang. Juliana McCaskill. These 3 ladies were part of our scorers, that was along with the 7 ladies we introduced earlier, and I would just like to recognize them one more time. Yui Hashino, Julie Shaughnessy, Samantha Mayer, Melissa Tanieri, Rin Furukawa, Ashley Wong, and Morgan Engel. So the girls cross-country team finished the regular season undefeated. They were divisional, conference, and Nassau County Class A champions. But what, yes. What makes it special, this was the 11th consecutive Nassau County championship for our girls program. Great job, girls. Congratulations. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce once again Mr. Rich Caffiero.
So our cross-country season begins in late June with our varsity athletes running anywhere between 400 and 500 miles over the course of the summer, training with our summer training program. We ride that foundation of fitness as long as we could into October and November. This year we were able to take our first overnight trip in 3 years, and I can't tell you how awesome it was, making some deeper friendships between each other and making some lasting memories. Goes a long way. Also, for the 17th time in the last 25 years, we were able to capture the Nassau County cross-country team title. This year we were in a unique spot. 5 members of the championship team have never run in a varsity race before. Inexperience proved to be our strength as we ran our best race when it counted the most, upsetting the top 2 seeds going into the race to take home the title. 9 out of 10 ran their best times of their life. In addition to the overall team success, some athletes earned all county honors that you heard from before. I'll just list the 10 that towed the line. Step forward when I call your name, please. Senior Jordan Altman, Senior Joseph Angadi, Senior Daniel Chan, Senior Jason Gutierrez, Senior John Hernandez, Junior Jesse LeBolt, Sophomores Sean Moschella and Tyler Gainey, and 9th grader Luis Cruz. I'd like to congratulations. I'd like to say something special about Jordan Altman, if I could. Jordan was the individual county champion, something he's been working towards since an 8th grader on our cross-country team. Jordan qualified for the New York State Championships in Utica, New York, and the prestigious New York State Federation Championships held in Wappingers Falls. However, it's Jordan's character that truly sets him apart from his competitors. Jordan was the sole winner of the Section 8 New York State Sportsmanship Award, given to just 1 athlete per section. He also won the Bill Ott Memorial Award, given by the Section 8 officials to, again, just 1 athlete in the entire county. Simply put, it's his balance and positivity that stands out every single day. He is at times, when it's appropriate, silly, goofy, and fun, but make no mistake, he is a fierce competitor, a missile on the track and on the cross-country course, coming for your back. Oh yeah, he has a 100 unweighted average, means never anything less than an A+, a perfect 36 out of 36 on the ACT. The SAT needs you. You don't need the SAT, Jordan. In short, Jordan takes his sport and craft very seriously, but doesn't take himself too seriously, something we could all admire. And 20 minutes ago, as I was driving here, maybe 40 minutes ago now, I was just notified by Mr. Marr of News 12 that he's winning the News 12 Scholar Athlete Award. Congratulations. boys on a great season.
That's going to be fun having you filmed on campus, Jordan. I look forward to that. And now I'd like to introduce once again Coach Mike Cipollino.
Thank you, and I'd first like to thank Dr. Rogers, the entire administrative staff, Mr. Stuber, the Board of Education for all your support, not just for the varsity program, but for all the aquatics programs that we run that help support all the way up through varsity. It was such a privilege to coach this wonderful group of enthusiastic, hardworking, committed, and positive-spirited girls. They encourage each other and push themselves to be better for each other. Their effort and commitment, both in and out of the season, enabled us to outperform preseason rankings, win the Conference 1 championship for the second consecutive season, and ultimately win Syosset Girls' first ever county championship. Here today from our county championship team are Hannah Chan, Audrey Chen, Rachel Chen, Amanda Chin, Amli Yang, Sarah Epstein, Sophia Giatanis, Anushka George, Iris Howe, Caroline Hugh, Megan Hugh, Sophie Kill, Katie Kahn, Joelle Lee, Rachel Lee, Jacqueline Liu, Rachel Liu, Hannah O, Kiara Solano, Kayling Tan, and Emily Young. Big round of applause, girls.
Once again, I'd like to thank the administration and the Board of Education for their continued support. And ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a great rest of the school year, continued success, and hope to see you back up on the stage soon. Thank you very much.
I'll just add my admiration and congratulations to that of everyone else's for our athletes, our appreciation to their coaches for their hard work. Parents, this is your opportunity to make a graceful exit with your children if you'd like, but there's going to be a board meeting that follows, and we'll need your patience for a few minutes while we reset the stage.
So the first thing we have is the approval of minutes of our meeting from December 12th, 2022. Can I have a motion, please? Lynn, seconded by Shawnee. Do I have any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Now we have the treasurer's report and appropriation adjustments. Dr. Rufo, if you will.
Thank you. As shown in the treasurer's report, the cash on hand for the month end November 2022 was $34,295,243.12 cents. It shows that book balances for these cash accounts were reconciled to the bank balances and were collateralized in accordance with the district's banking agreements and investment policy.
May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report and appropriation adjustments? Carol, seconded by Shawnee. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? The next order of business is the appointment to tenure of Carrie Horowitz, who is the South Grove Library Media Specialist. The role of the Library Media Specialist is a very special one in the elementary school, As the hub of the School for Research, Technology, and Innovation, the Library Media Specialist plays an integral role in supporting both students and staff. Mrs. Horowitz has done just that, leading the charge in information and research skills and educational technology. One of the first things she took on was redesigning the library space, making it a flexible, modern space that can be used for a variety of different projects and activities. The physical space mirrors what she has brought to the curricular program, a forward-thinking, flexible, supportive, instructional environment for the entire South Grove learning community. She is a caring individual who is willing to learn, grow, and excel in her field. We are so fortunate to have Mrs. Horowitz as a part of the South Grove team and congratulate her on this professional milestone. Could I have a motion, please, for the appointment to tenure of Carrie Horowitz, the South Grove Library Media Specialist? Lynn, seconded by Brian. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations, Mrs. Horowitz.
And I always take the opportunity whenever we recognize someone for tenure to make the same point I always do, which is you have 4 years to get to know us, and we have 4 years to get to know you. And when we get to this point in someone's career, it's our affirmation that you are the kind of person that we know will build the Syosset of the future, and that's why we want to make and extend this form of recognition to you, but also to make permanent the relationship that we have with you as a member of this faculty. So congratulations, and keep doing exactly what you're doing.
Okay, now we move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Rogers.
Thank you so much. So it was a great time to recognize a lot of the wonderful things that are going on with our students, particularly in our athletic program. As you might imagine, that success doesn't happen by accident. It's the product of a lot of work, hard work by students to be sure, and hard work by faculty as well. One of the things that we wanted to do is marry up these two opportunities, the chance to see our young people and acknowledge their accomplishments, but also to think about how we prepare throughout the K-12 environment to get our young people ready to have what we call physical literacy. We certainly understand what it means to be a literate adult. We understand the importance of numeracy as well. But we all travel this planet in our bodies, and the better we understand and maintain our bodies, the better that experience of traveling the planet is going to be. So we take physical education very seriously, and I'd like to ask Mr. Stuber to come back to the microphone so that he can do a presentation.
Once again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Dr. Rogers, Board of Education, for this opportunity to share with you the many fantastic programs the Syosset Central School District provides to our students and community. Although I've only been with the district for a little over 6 months, I am confident that our physical education program and our athletic programs continue to be a model of excellence that many districts aspire to attain. The success of our program is truly a team effort, and that starts with our elementary physical education staff, who take great pride in instilling a true joy for participation in physical activity. Our middle school staff continues to develop skills that will be the foundation for their high school experiences and their middle school athletic participation for those students who seek those opportunities. At the high school level, we pride ourselves in helping students take ownership of their own personal health and wellness as they begin to focus their attention to activities that interest them. So what does a Syosset physically educated student look like? I would like to answer that question with the two students seen in the center picture alongside Mr. Strohmeyer, one of our phys ed teachers. These two young people were recognized by the New York State Association for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance as our Nassau Zone Outstanding Physical Education Award winners in December. Both Angelo Fasano and Eleni Koris represent all the great qualities so many of our students share, but in different ways. Angelo is an all-county volleyball player, as we recognized him tonight, and an integral part of the baseball program. Too often, we associate excellence in physical education with athletic performance. However, athletics is an extension of our outstanding physical education program, not the goal. Eleni, despite being very talented, has not chosen to be part of one of our interscholastic athletic teams, much to the chagrin of our coaching staff. She still has developed an appreciation and recognizes the value of physical activity for her health, enjoyment, challenge, self-expression, and social interaction, as she knows where in her community she can find things that interest her. What is physical literacy? Although we are very proud of Angelo and Eleni, we want all of our students to leave Syosset High School as physically literate lifelong learners. A physically literate person has the ability to move with competence and confidence in a wide variety of physical activities in multiple environments that benefit the healthy development of the whole person. A quality, comprehensive physical education program like ours includes teaching young students to understand spatial and body awareness and how to move. As they start to hone these skills, we begin to incorporate them in traditional and non-traditional games as the movements become more intentional and specific to the various activities. As we transition to the high school level, the focus becomes more specific to the individual student's interests. At the K through 12 levels, we focus on developmentally appropriate skills, providing a foundation of concepts in body and spatial awareness. As you can see in this slide, most of those skills, like the locomotor skills, include running, jumping, hopping, skipping, and galloping. And this is really an integral part of the development, and this is where those skills are developed. And if they don't really have the opportunity to practice and learn those skills, it definitely becomes harder as they get older. Balance and weight transfer are critical to success in many sport activities. I think most people understand the importance of throwing in opposition, but if you think about other sports that we do as we get older, a lot of those activities require stepping in opposition. So hopefully if we get those learners active and involved and we teach them the correct skills at the elementary level, they'll have the ability to perform and they'll be more successful. Students participate in a variety of modified games and challenging activities that will promote confidence and motivation to become active throughout their young lives. Additionally, these experiences will introduce students to personal responsibility, sportsmanship, and appropriate behavior during activity. During grades 3 to 5, students begin to understand the difference between skill-related and health-related components of fitness and demonstrate more mature movement patterns and start to combine these skills during their physical activity. Additionally, they're starting to become more aware of their individual interests and the different level of competitiveness. At the middle school level, we incorporate the skills learned during the elementary school years in more dynamic class settings. Students understand the connection between physical activity and the components of fitness that will enhance their health-related fitness. Understanding the connection between exercise and its emotional benefits will also provide the foundational practices that will be developed and encouraged throughout their time in school and extend into their adult life. A great emphasis is placed on students' personal and social behavior during physical activity that respects self and others. These standards are important at all levels, but the middle school level is where students will start to identify what activities they enjoy participating in, so the emphasis on civility and citizenship in physical education class is very high. And some of the activities we do, again, as I mentioned before, we start to work on more advanced throwing and catching. We start to incorporate offense and defensive strategy. One of the things you'll see with the net and wall game sports, the serving, striking, specifically in the sport of volleyball, which is very popular here in Syosset. Again, the weight transfer becomes very important at this stage. If they haven't learned that skill, it's much harder to be successful. You're also going to start to see students start to identify with non-sport related activities such as dance, rhythm activities, and yoga. At the high school level, well, if you think middle school is challenging, imagine how hard it is for students as they graduate middle school and transition into the high school. All ninth grade students will participate in a Freshman 101 seminar to assist in the transition, which includes the following: the Getting to Know You activities, which are introduced to increase comfort levels and identify commonalities. Digital citizenship expands on appropriate behavior in the social media realm. Peers as leaders from the senior class come in and explain high school myths versus realities to ease the transition into ninth grade. The Pride lessons reinforces the core pillars of Syosset, which are patience, respect, integrity, dignity, and empathy. Although much of our curriculum tends to focus on the psychomotor domain, our staff continues to prioritize the cognitive and affective domains as well, as they are all significant in each student's growth as an individual. As students enter the high school, our health and physical education department work collaboratively to ensure the health concepts and skills learned at the middle school level continue to be developed so students have the knowledge, skills, and values to navigate their high school years and beyond. And as you can see, some of the topics that are included in our 20 or so lessons in wellness and advisory are stress, sexuality and relationships, CPR, AED training, which obviously, as we've seen in the news recently, is critical, substance abuse, cyberbullying, mindfulness, fitness and nutrition, vaping, HIV, AIDS, and really the teachers look at whatever other current issues, both locally and globally, kids are experiencing. We'll address those as needed. Given the Syosset Central School District's commitment to swimming, as evident in our adult education program, our many community swim programs, and our elite high school swim teams, our physical education swim program has something for all abilities. High school students can take aquatics or advanced aquatics that introduce the various aquatic skills while also serving as a prerequisite for lifeguard and water safety instruction. Students who aspire to earn lifeguard certification will learn all the necessary skills and techniques to save lives and prepare for the vigorous physical exam. Students also have the unique opportunity to become WSI certified so they can teach swimming for people of all ages and levels. I'm proud to share that Syosset is the only school in Nassau County and possibly Long Island that provides this program to their students. Both lifeguarding and WSI certifications allow our students to seek valuable employment opportunities. They provide the students with unique leadership and teamwork skills that are essential in today's society. Our students can work as swim instructors or lifeguards in the summer, as well as during the school year. In fact, many colleges and universities are in need of lifeguards, allowing our students to earn more money in work-study programs. And if you take a look at the bottom part of the slide where it says swim program success, why are we so successful in swimming? Our Learn to Swim program has a waiting list each session of almost 200 children. The pool, probably the most amazing thing to me in my time here is the use of this pool. From the first time you get here in the morning till I leave late at night, that pool is in use. We have our Stingrays youth swim team. Over 300 young children signed up to earn a spot. They have 127 roster spots that they were able to fill. They just really can't handle more than that in the pool. Both boys and girls middle school teams are offered. We have full rosters. Unfortunately, we do have to cut some students, so their times are a factor in making the team. We also have full boys and girls swimming and diving teams at the varsity level. And additionally, we have an adult ed program, 2 nights of adult Learn to Swim, and we have a waiting list for those activities as well. To say we are leaders in the area of high school strength and conditioning on Long Island is an understatement. I cannot even count how many times I have been contacted by my colleagues in Nassau and Suffolk County to inquire about our programs, our facilities, and more importantly, how we have made strength and conditioning such an integral part of our physical education and athletic programs. you can obviously everybody on the board knows the facility, but one of the things that is really impressive is not only what is done during the school day, but the fact that we have strength and conditioning open to all of our students in the school, not just the athletes. So you can go there any time of the summer or during the school year. You may say any regular student just wants to come. They got a certified strength and conditioning coach working with them, developing programs that are developmentally appropriate for them. But we also have team-specific workouts and lifts, again, under the supervision of the certified staff. And what really has impressed me in my time was pregame. I've never seen it done at the high school level, but Mr. Gagstetter will meet with members of every athletic team prior to a competition, and he has a very carefully planned and designed warm-up that the students do before they go and compete on the field, which, again, a lot of our success on the athletic field and in the gyms and in the pool are a result of the training that these students do under the supervision of our coaches. I'm also proud to announce that I'm working with Mr. Chris Gagstetter and Mr. Mike Murtha on a presentation for not just our local zone at the New York State Association for Health, Phys Ed, Recreation, Dance, but at the state conference in November of 2023. This is a classic case of if you build it, they will come. I was not here when the weight room was in the portable trailers, thankfully, but I can assure you that this outstanding program, despite excellent and committed instructors, would not be possible without the support of the Board of Education and the community in building such a fine facility. How do we improve our programs to support our district's mission of preparing students for the future we imagine and one which may evolve in ways yet to be envisioned? Will we continue to provide opportunities for students and community members to engage in physical activity, sports, and other recreational endeavors, but we do face some challenges. And I think some of the challenges you can see up there, limitation of space. Again, we have a lot of waiting lists for certain programs. We're unable to run some of the intramural programs that the students have been looking for, specifically pickleball, obviously, which is growing. Volleyball is one of those things that we just can't facilitate enough programs for. And we are, unfortunately, having to turn kids away from athletic participation. But what are we doing? Well, we're very fortunate. We're transporting teams to off-site locations. We rent St. Mark's for our basketball program, Island Extreme for our cheerleading program. Our boys and girls track programs in the winter can go to St. Anthony's at times as needed. Our tennis teams have used Bethpage Tennis Center, and the Sports Hub is used by a number of teams. And I also know many of the booster clubs help coordinate and rent out the Sports Hub for the many off-season workouts. If you haven't had a chance to see our fencing team, they practice and compete in the student lobby. And unfortunately, our Orcs gym is not always available for athletics outside of small practices because we use it as a wrestling room from November to March. And we will split up practice sessions in the classrooms. In conclusion, I would be remiss if I did not thank our incredible physical education and health education and athletic staff here at Syosset. I am so excited and proud to be part of such a wonderful community and a committed school district. I've had the distinct pleasure of working with so many great and dedicated professionals these last 6+ months, and I'm beyond thankful for the work they do with your children, and I look forward to our continued growth. Once again, on behalf of my entire staff, I would like to thank the Board of Education for your continued commitment and dedication to our phys ed, athletic, and recreational programs. Thank you very much.
I would just piggyback on that by saying I think one of the most remarkable things, obviously we're very proud of the success of our athletes, but I think what is remarkable is seeing the level of interest in the strength and conditioning by students who are not athletes. And we went from 2 sections of strength and conditioning now to 18 sections of strength and conditioning. And, one of the challenges here is not interest. We have more interest than we can ever serve with the facilities that we have. And so I think your department has done some incredibly creative things to try and match that level of interest, but we know that we have limitations that just keep us from doing that. And we want to be a district that is as interested in the physical health of non-athletes as we are in the physical health of our athletes as well. And so that's a challenge we continue to work on, but the work that we do in classrooms and in the phys ed program is just remarkable. Ms. Casilla, I don't know if board members have questions for myself or Mr. Stuber, or I'll go on with my report.
Maybe both of you can answer this. I've been inside the fitness center. It's absolutely incredible, and I'd like to think that I have some experience in weight rooms. But my question is, how often or how early can high schools, Jack, don't laugh, how early can a high school student start taking one of the 18 sections? Is it 10th grade? Is it 11th grade?
Gotten into the sections and are actively involved in those classes. So under those 18 sections, which I failed to mention, we have a strength and conditioning class every period of the school day, at least one period, one section every period. And it's right outside my office. It's fascinating. It's such an amazing thing to watch, to see kids of all levels. And they all have their own personal goals, and they use the electronic technology in the room. Every student has what their goals are. They're working towards them. They all work together for their individual goals, but they also keep a record. They actually get to compete, and they learn Olympic lifts, and Mr. Murtha has them competing for national certification. It's amazing. And I believe, in talking to the staff, they really try to start that with the 10th grade level. They just feel like give the kids the freshman year to explore all the different opportunities and then narrow their focus. But every once in a while, you might get a 9th grader in that section.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. That term, what is it? Physical literacy turned the light bulb in my head. And I had this question. I mean, we celebrate the stars that we have in physical education in the team, and we are basically ranking the top trophies in Nassau County, and we're so proud of them. And thank you so much for working with them to make this kind of results. But after 13 years of physical education in Syosset School District, what is the acceptable level of physical literacy for the students who are not the stars? What would you expect?
I used to always tell my staff years ago, you may not know how successful you were as a teacher until you see those students come back. So being new to the district, I don't know many of the former students, but they come back and they utilize the resources available to them within the community. Your tennis courts are used all summer long, from 6 in the morning until the sun goes down. So when you leave high school, you leave Syosset High School, you really should know, number one, what interests you, and you should be able to identify the resources within your community where you can continue to participate. And I mentioned before pickleball. We talk about knowing, not knowing what the future holds. When I started teaching pickleball in 1995, I had no idea what pickleball was. Colleagues that were mentoring me were showing me the sport, and never in my wildest dreams did I think you would see facilities popping up all around Long Island, all over the East Coast, where people are fighting to get indoors during the cold months to play pickleball. But there are places for them to go, just like when students know to go to sport time for certain activities. I think one of the things, when students leave high school and they go on to college, they need to know that they pay fees for their tuition when they go to college. And those fees allow them access to college facilities. So that's part of being physically literate. And not everybody likes to swim. Some school districts would try to force swimming, kids just won't get changed. So when they go to college and they're on their own, what are they going to do to continue to live healthy lives? And that's really the ultimate goal of being physically literate, finding what interests you, keeping yourself physically active and healthy into your adult lives. And that's different for everybody. Some people just want to play softball, flag football. Some people want to play racket sports, tennis. Some people just want to walk. And there are a lot of places on Long Island that are popping up and all around the country. And being able to know where to go so they can continue to be active is really our ultimate goal.
I have one more question. today we saw so many students, and just like the diverse community that we are, we saw so many students here of all different backgrounds. But I've seen some pictures of some teams that lack that diversity. And I'm thinking the reason may be due to lack of space, lack of turning people away, what you mentioned, that not able to accept as many students in the team as possible. So that may be the reason, but what are your thoughts about that kind of lacking that diversity in a team?
Hopefully, you're providing a foundation for all students to find something they're passionate about. But certain, families may or may not be into athletics, and I think exposure to certain sports at a young age will definitely start to separate who's playing in what sports. So if your family values swimming and you start swimming at a young age, like many people in the community, when you enter a sport that has to cut students based on performance or times, a lot of it's going to be your past experience. As far as cultural differences, it really depends on what you're exposed to. And I think of what I expose my kids to, based on what I like to do, a lot of that continues. So really we're trying to expose students to as many things as possible so that they know they have other opportunities. And that's one area we're going to continue to look to grow.
And with many years of having students here early on and exposing them early on, hopefully that mixture is what we'll see later in the high school and so.
We do hope so.
I would just piggyback on Mr. Stuber's comments by saying that as we think about when we turn kids away, and then we think about students, this is only parenthetical to the question that you're asking, but we don't expect all students to physically develop at the same rate or pace. But because of the space limitations that we have, when we get to a sport that has some sort of a screen where we only take the most competent athletes or the fastest athletes or the strongest athletes, you're necessarily screening out students who may become elite in that sport but haven't yet because of where they are developmentally. And that doesn't correlate to your question about ethnicity necessarily or diversity, but it does say that there are all kinds of students that might at some point in their lives develop to have the physical tools that are necessary to play in a certain sport, but because at the point in time when the district runs out of space for them, a decision has to be made, they may get on an off-ramp from a sport before they really have fully seen their own potential. So I think in addition to early exposure to lots of sports so kids find what they like, the ability for kids to stay with sports as they develop is also important to giving kids more options so that they don't developmentally find themselves unable to compete too early in their adolescence.
Well, first I wanted to say thank you because our athletics program is top-notch, and it's hard to find another district that has a program as amazing as ours, which is fantastic for so many reasons. But as we're saying, definitely makes it tough if you're not, a rock star athlete. It makes it hard to make the team and the sport. Has there been any kind of, I know the administration wants to include as many kids as possible. Has there been any thought to doing any kind of program that will allow those kids who are cut from the team to be able to train or come in or learn, to piggyback on Dr. Rogers' statement, because some kids develop later, and if they don't have an opportunity, then they never know what could have been. So is there any kind of opportunity for that?
It is tough. Syosset offers more interscholastic activities than almost any other school in Nassau County. So, for example, in the winter, we have 6 basketball teams at the high school level. We have 2 JV teams, boys and girls, where some schools are not even running JV programs. We have 2 for both teams. They literally don't have a space to put them in. Sometimes coaches choose to come in the morning. I was working with Mr. Strohmeyer. We were starting intramural pickleball, but then teams had to come in and practice. They get bumped. So one of the things that, like I watched the volleyball tryouts in August. We had 70-something students looking to play volleyball. Ideally, we would love to be able to find time where we could provide intramural volleyball. I literally have to take volleyballs away from kids. They bring their own volleyballs, and then they sneak in and they're hooking nets up in the Orcs gym where we have wrestling mats laid out trying to play volleyball. The demand is there. It's just a matter of trying to find space. So wherever we can find time, even if it's for a half hour, we try to provide that opportunity, but it is difficult.
Can those kids ever join practice, even if they can't play or train, or just the space is too limiting?
The space is really too limited. The good news is almost the entire athletic program offers intramurals open to all students. So in the off season, especially in the summer, all students are welcome to come and train. There's no limit. If we have too many people, which we had, they'll do split sessions. So the coaches spend a lot of their time trying to continue to teach skills that when these kids come to tryouts, they're better equipped. But again, the summer's a little different. It's a little easier to get gym time, but during the school year, it's tight. If I could just ask one more favor. I have a few athletes that I think they want to go home and study, but they've asked, they're going to come and sign in to speak, and would it be okay if I let them speak briefly? Thank you. This is the senior athletes on our girls' varsity basketball team.
Hello, my name is Casey Gamar, and I'm a senior and a captain of the varsity girls basketball team. I want to take a moment to thank Mr. Stuber and Dr. Rogers and our Board of Education for giving us an opportunity to play at Farmingdale State College this past weekend. We appreciate all of the work it takes to make this happen. On behalf of our seniors and varsity team, thank you all for your continued support. It has been a pleasure being a student athlete at Syosset High School. Thank you.
Sorry. Casey and the rest of the girls from the basketball, before you leave, am I catching them? I'm sorry. I just want to say, on behalf of the board, we commend you for coming here and sitting through a very big portion of the meeting tonight to say thank you. Just so that you know, it's our pleasure to do that. We are here for you guys so that you can do what you love. So the minute we get a phone call from Dr. Rogers or whoever it is saying, hey, can we do this last minute, we are more than happy to do what we have to do for you girls, and we're so proud of each and every one of you. So thank you for just who you girls are. We're very proud of you.
All right, back to my report. Furkan, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the next presentation. To set this up, as the board certainly knows and the public may know, we've been experiencing some enrollment roller coasters as a result of the pandemic. What we thought would happen in the first year of the pandemic is we would see families leaving the city because we felt we had a more robust pandemic education program than the city was providing. That didn't happen, and actually our enrollment went down. And then in last summer, the summer of 2021, we saw a burst in enrollment that went in the opposite direction. So that roller coaster obviously got our attention. We recruited a national consultant to do some enrollment studies for us so that we could try to get a handle on whether this was a one-year blip or it was going to be an ongoing trend for us. I'll have more to say about that in a minute. And then I have a couple of follow-ups from last month's board meeting. The board members asked me some questions to go out and do some research for you, and so I have the responses to those. So first, the board had asked if we could look at a 9 o'clock start time. Comment was made that Jericho nearby has a 9 o'clock start time for their high school, and what would it look like if we were to do that here? We did, and I should credit Claudia Hardis, our transportation supervisor, for all the hard work she did to try and piece together the puzzle pieces that would make this possible, but she did come up with a configuration that would make it possible to start the high school at 9 o'clock. It would involve a couple of fairly dramatic changes. One would be that the elementary day would have to be extended by 30 minutes. We would try to find some enhancements to the program that would take up that time for students. We can think about some of the work that our social workers are doing with kids right now that could be enhanced, maybe some additional time for play. We would try to make that time as valuable for kids as possible, but we would have to lengthen the elementary day to make that work. Having such a late end time for the high school, would be ending at 3, basically 10 of 4, means that clubs and other kinds of things that would typically happen after school, like extra help, would have to happen in the morning. And we worry that clubs and extra help would then start competing with one another. But the flip side is it would be possible, there's enough space in that morning window to do two things, to have a student who wanted to get to the high school earlier just ride on the middle school bus and be dropped off either by the Southwoods bus, or have the HPT bus go across town and drop them off before doing the elementary school run. So it would be possible to get to the high school early for those clubs or extra help on a bus. Second, to do the dismissal from the high school and try to do it as expeditiously as possible at the end of the day, you'd need to be able to stage the buses quickly. Right now, the only surface asphalt that we have is the loops in front of the high school, and it takes 2.5 shifts to get all the buses through there. So one group of buses loads the circle, and you have to wait until the students have loaded the buses and the buses have exited the circle before you can reload the circle, and you end up having to go through that cycle 3 times. So to avoid having students wait a long time after 3:51 for their wave of buses to come through the circle, which could take as many as 20 minutes, you'd want to have all the buses load simultaneously, so that would require us to construct more loading space, more asphalt. Sports, we have been disappointed, in fact, this year that we haven't been able to get buses before 4 o'clock. But if the high school start time were to be moved that much later, those buses would be later still. In any event, we presented last month several different scenarios. This scenario is certainly plausible. I don't think it has any fatal flaws, but it does have some sobering compromises that would be required. So we would want to get some public engagement before and see what the public thinks. The last time we did public engagement, we included staff, parents, and students in a thought exchange online survey tool to get impressions from folks. And so we envision doing the same thing again this time around. Sure.
Is there a cost associated with increasing the elementary school day? And if so, how much?
I haven't estimated what the cost would be. We would not increase the length of the instructional day of the teachers, the classroom teachers, because that's controlled by the contract. So what we're imagining is that we would do additional work with our social workers. Obviously, we're hoping to increase the staffing for social workers at the elementary school. There are some things that happen before the school day now, things like clubs and extra help sessions, jazz band, those kinds of things. We would imagine that they would move from before school to the middle of the school day to take up some of that time. So some of that would be repurposing existing time, some of that would be new purposes, but I can't put dollars and cents on it. What we were trying to do, we put a lot of time into making the buses work, so I haven't gotten quite as far as the staffing of that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, before we move on, this scenario is not adding, my understanding is not adding minimal or no buses. So if we have to build a staging area and put money into it that way versus putting that money into adding buses and having maybe more flexibility in the timing of when things start and finish. So for instance, the high school could have before and after, because I know the scattered help and clubs is beneficial to a lot of kids so they don't have to decide. if we're going to have to put in money to it either way, is adding more buses a more not responsible, but like constructive way to get what we need, and maybe not have it start at 9, but 8:30 or whatever, so that we can do the before and after and have that flexibility for the teachers and the students.
Yeah, it's certainly a question of whether you want to put money into buses or into asphalt. The problem is that the order of magnitude of those two things is not comparable. So the asphalt might be a one-time expenditure of, let's say, $250,000 or something in that nature. Just 1 year of renting enough busing capacity to make a meaningful dent would probably be in the order of, say, $3 million. And so that would be a $3 million every year kind of expense. Each tier, we run about 140 buses a day between private school and our own school busing. And the tiers are on the order of, let's say, 80 buses or so for each tier of busing. So the elementary school tier is about 80 buses, middle school tier is about 80 buses. So if you wanted to decouple the high school tier from the constraints of the other two tiers, you'd basically have to replicate all of that busing. I'm sure we would find some efficiencies somewhere so it wouldn't be all 80 buses, but it's not the kind of thing where with 10 or 15 buses we could make a meaningful difference. We would have to have a pretty dramatic increase in the amount of busing that we do.
Seems like I'm always asking you about buses, so I apologize for the perseveration, but the ridership that we have right now at high school is relatively low for comparative to elementary and middle school. If we push the high school start time back and ridership moves to a more, let's call, normalized level of, roughly middle school levels, is our tiering enough to match that new demand, or the tiering is already sufficient? So in other words, there's no incremental change needed for those additional riders.
Yeah, right now we schedule the busing so that there's a seat for every student. So if the ridership improved because kids weren't getting up as early in the morning, as I think that's your question, then we wouldn't have any incremental cost increase because they would just now occupy the seats that are currently going vacant. One thing that we looked at with the busing consultant was whether we could consolidate a lot of these runs because not every kid is taking advantage of the seat. The state changed the law, I'm going to say 15 years ago, to allow that. It used to be you were required to have a seat for every student, but the state recognized that not all of those seats were being used and that we should seek efficiencies. So the challenge that we have is that often the earliest bus stop for a high school run will be 6:25 a.m. or 6:30 a.m., even though the start time isn't until 7:39, and it's just because there's a long bus run ahead of them. And so if we consolidated those runs, what it essentially means is you have a bus that's not just clearing one neighborhood, it's clearing that neighborhood and the next one over, and so the run just gets longer. So whoever had that 6:30 bus stop now has a 6:25 or a 6:21 pickup, and it makes it longer. So we couldn't find any efficiencies in the busing that didn't have a penalty in terms of how long some kids would have to be on the bus. So for the current system, there's nothing to achieve there, but in your hypothetical system, we might have better use of the busing, and the more kids that ride buses, the fewer cars on Southwoods Road. That would be a collateral benefit.
Dr. Rogers, I think it was Transpar, whoever did our Bell study last year, they put together various scenarios, none of which included this scenario. And I'm assuming we gave them constraints. One of those constraints was probably not having the high school end after 3:30 or something like that. Is that the reason why they never explored this? And are there any issues that I'm not thinking of right now that obviously you've thought of about ending the high school day at 3:51?
So I'll take those in reverse order. Other things that will be challenges about ending the high school day, It's our understanding that there are a lot of students who provide childcare for their younger siblings. So when the high school dismisses first, the high school student gets home first, and so they're there to meet the student who would otherwise be a latchkey kid. So if the high school is now the last to dismiss, the ability to have that high school student provide service to the younger person. There will be a little bit of a disconnect with BOCES programs because the BOCES runs on a county-wide schedule. So if you're the latest district in the county, you'll end up going early to the BOCES program because the morning program is going to start at BOCES when it starts. It means you'll have more time back here in Syosset in the afternoon, but then conversely, if you're in an afternoon program at BOCES, you'd have less time here at the home district because you'd be leaving earlier in the day to go to the BOCES program. We understand lots of kids have after-school religious instruction or piano lessons, gymnastics lessons that they would have to go to. So the later end day, would just constrain the ability for students to do those kinds of things after school. And as students get older, they'll have internships or work-study programs or just part-time jobs, and so that also constrains the amount of time that's available for those as well. So all of those things came up the last time around when we studied start time and we were taking feedback from the community. These were all themes that came out of that community engagement. And then, yes, we did give Transpar a bunch of constraints. This scenario would not have met those constraints for two reasons. One, the high school day is ending later than we would have permitted in our constraints, and we didn't give them permission to just lengthen the elementary day by half an hour at their discretion. But Claudia, the board asked for something, we give the board something. So that was the thing that had to be changed in order to make it possible to give the board a scenario to look at with a 9 o'clock start. So this was the way to make it work.
So, maybe I'm confusing this issue. So last time we had three options. I think only one of them was flipping middle school and high school was the only one that had any sort of traction amongst us. I think we talked about bumping everything back so there'd be no bus issues as a potential option, and then we talked about the 9 o'clock start time for the high school. So where are we now? That's a question for all of us, of course. Like, we're talking about going out to the community for feedback. Are we going out with just 9? Are we going out with what was scenario 1 in Transpar's study? And are we going out with just the idea of trying to gain the extra 15 or 20 minutes across the board? Or all three?
The beauty of the thought exchange tool is that it doesn't constrain you by the format of a regular survey where you would ask a series of questions. Would you like the high school painted blue? Would you like the high school painted green, et cetera? So it allows people to offer a thought and then for other people to react to that thought, whether they concur with it or disagree with it. And then you see the kinds of thoughts that generate the most agreement and the kinds of thoughts that generate the most disagreement. So the open-ended nature of it means it's sort of a self-creating survey because the kinds of things that generate the most engagement are the ones that people are most interested in. So it's a really useful tool from that perspective, but I've found that when we use that tool, it works best if we give people something to react to. So the last time around, what we did was we made available to the community what we thought were the most viable scenarios from our original study and then said, read this first, then click this link and give us your thoughts. So I would propose that we do the same thing this time where we would take what I think are the most viable approaches from these discussions, and in my mind right now it's this is viable, so it would be a potential scenario. The one that flips, as you said, the middle school and high school is also, I think, a viable approach. The one that just pushes everything back 20 minutes, I think, is viable. And, the question for the public is it worth it? I think Mr. Ostrick at the last meeting, read through some of the studies around start time that said you have to have a more significant change in start time than 20 minutes to really achieve much in the way of sleep. So I'm picturing a short briefing paper for the public to read and then ask them to share their thoughts and reactions in that thought exchange tool, and then we would process that public feedback as a leadership group here to try and make some decisions on what, if any, next steps the district would take.
If everybody, let's say, for argument's sake, decided that the 9 o'clock high school start time was the way to go, how long would it take to do the construction of the asphalt to get the staging in order?
That's a good question and one that we've been wrestling with. So in terms of actually doing the work, it's something that would fit in a summer construction season. So then the question becomes, how long would it take for us to get State Education Department approval? And how long would it take for us to bid the job, find a bidder that we liked, and then execute the bid? It's getting tight, already getting tight to be able to do that. So we're watching the clock closely. We haven't run out of time yet, but we're watching the clock closely, and I'm hoping that we can move forward with some public engagement so that we can keep the process moving and not foreclose an opportunity for ourselves.
When you say getting tight, you mean for the start of next year? Okay.
Sorry, just, I guess, two things. One is a comment. We call this the 9 o'clock start time for the high school, but this really greatly affects the elementary school also. So I want to make sure that parents don't see 9 o'clock high school start time and kind of dismiss it from the elementary school, because it has a big effect on their day and their children. I'm a little concerned about the extra half hour and what that means to the children, especially as it seems to be not an instructional half hour, which is, I'm not against. I'm fine with play and things like that, but I think that we have to have a real plan as to what that would entail and what it means to the children and the benefits, because their school day is long to begin with. So those are my concerns.
This is consistent with Ms. Abronson's comment. The thought exchange tool, because I don't remember it. I mean, I remember the end result, but I don't remember getting the original form. Will it mention her comment? Like, will it say, for option 3, we would be adding 30 minutes to the elementary school day? That would not necessarily be instructional time.
Yeah, the briefing paper, I hope, if we do a good job with the briefing paper, the person who reads it will understand that all busing is connected, and any change at one level is going to ripple through all levels. So this is a complicated project, and often districts that do this work do it over the course of, say, 18 months because it is so complicated. So on the one hand, I feel like we have a head start on that 18 months because we did so much work on this before the pandemic. On the other hand, we went quiet for 2 years on this topic, and now we're coming back to it. So it may be hard for the public to kind of catch up to where we are in terms of the research that we've done. And I think that will also come out in the comments that we get once we do that public engagement. But we won't know until we start to really engage with parents and staff and frankly, students.
Yeah, so actually I did have a question regarding the elementary length of day. Is our length of day average or below average or above average in terms of how much time elementary? I had a sense that it was actually slightly below average compared to the rest of neighboring districts currently. I'm not sure if that's true or not, and I had a follow-up.
No, you're accurate. The State Education Department minimum is a 5-hour day, and about 5 years ago, we had a 5-hour day for elementary students, 5-hour instructional day. And through some creative scheduling, we were able to lengthen that elementary school day. I would say that we're probably right in the middle of the pack now in terms of length of day, but many districts are longer than ours.
Yeah, there was only one other thing, which is when we frame the feedback tool, is this only going to be agreeing with ideas in principle without any accompanying measure of cost? In other words, are people agreeing to things in a vacuum without understanding the cons that might be direct in addition to the ones that are indirect? I'm just trying to refresh my memory about how the tool worked.
So what we would do in constructing the briefing paper for the parents would be to point out some sort of obvious collateral implications of something. I'm reluctant to kind of do pros and cons like we're trying to lead people to one solution or another. But we certainly don't want to disguise maybe unintended consequences that would come along. I think you, in transparency, you would want to say, here's a good feature, you might get more sleep. Here's a bad feature, it might be very hard to schedule an internship after school, just from a time perspective, and kind of put all of that in there. But I don't want to necessarily lead people to all the cons. I think part of the exchange last time was parents readily saw what the cons were because they looked at their own children's schedule and said, oh, this won't work for my kid anymore because the bus will get here too late, or I will have to pick my child up now because the bus will take too long. So those kinds of things came out, I think, very quickly in the last go-round.
Just the last thing is, when we present the options, we're presenting them within a fixed framework in the sense that there are no other constraints that we can potentially relax when we're asking parents to review them. So in other words, let's say theoretically we coupled this with some other changes that we made, let's say to busing or to some other after-school program or before-school program or something to that effect. When we do the thought exchange, we're asking people to agree with concepts, right, essentially, but not giving them the freedom to relax other constraints that might change their opinion later on. Is that sort of factually right?
What happened the last time was, in addition to people kind of giving us feedback through the Thought Exchange tool, there were some people that just emailed us and said, like, this isn't how I want to give you my feedback. Let me tell you what I think. And so we got a lot of email, and people, had opinions of all kinds. And we're fortunate that we have very engaged employee associations. We'll engage with them, not just through the tool, but through their leadership as well, to get feedback from them and their thoughts. Same thing with our PTA. We have very engaged PTA. We'll engage with them as well to get their feedback. So we'll have multiple mechanisms for getting information, but the advantage of having an online tool is it's one of those things that is fairly easy to use. It doesn't require a giant time commitment. And so for people who really want to bury themselves in the details, the way to do that is our usual ways of interacting through PTA and other organs of the district. And for people who want to share an opinion but don't want to necessarily invest a tremendous amount of time in it, they'll have this ability to do that as well.
So I just have two things. One would be, when would the community expect this survey to be going out? Like, just a rough idea of when. And also, I just have a concern for people that, let's say, don't watch the board meetings, or, they work long hours and they don't have a chance to talk with other people. If they're not made aware ahead of time that this kind of, because this is, we've been talking about this for multiple meetings, if they're not made aware ahead of time, and then this survey would go out with very little background for them, is there a way that we could just give background, let's say, to the community ahead of time and then send the survey? Just want to know what the steps would be for that, in other words. Thanks.
As you know, we've hired a new public information officer who has been doing a great job of schooling me in how to make sure that we get people's attention. So for the universal pre-K enrollment, I think we did 3 reminders to families before we said, now you really should go into it. So it's sort of a, guess what's coming? The pre-K. Guess what's coming? The pre-K. Here it is. It's the pre-K. So I think what we would do is something similar here, where maybe in one of my Friday updates that gets a lot of circulation, we would tell people about the work that's been going on at the board meeting and alert them that we're going to be seeking their opinion shortly, and then maybe do that again in another Friday update, and then have a separate email that's just tailored towards this. I would want us to start that before the next board meeting, so we might have some initial reactions for me to share with you.
Thank you.
All right. At the last meeting, you also had a discussion as a board on the mascot, and you had asked me to come up with some research for you on follow-up items. So I was asked to do some research with the state and see whether the state was going to provide any funding to do the rebranding costs that might be associated with this. The reactions that I got were not promising. Basically was the notion that there were a lot of districts that had already done changes to mascots and paid for it out of their own funds, and that the state would assume that others that would come along would not get a benefit that the early adopters did not get. So I didn't think that that seemed likely. I asked about the status of the advisory council that was talked about in an Albany Times Union article. I learned a little bit more about that. The State Education Department runs some Native American schools, and there are some reservations in New York, and the department has recognized the need for them to have an advisory council because of their role in working with these schools. And so what is anticipated is that advisory council will be constituted shortly and will meet shortly, and then within that advisory council there will be a subcommittee that is tasked specifically with dealing with mascots. But the department understands that because of the budgetary implications and the short timeline, that whatever work they do, they need to do prior to the district getting heavily engaged in our own budget cycle, so that we or any other district similarly situated would have time to do some planning in the budget. So I anticipate that they'll move quickly, but other than understanding a little bit more about the background, I don't have exactly a time frame on that. There was a question about when the state's new regulation would become effective. I hypothesized at the last meeting that it would be in May, and I've since confirmed that it would be become official on May 3rd, assuming that, I don't want to assume the board's action, but assuming the Board of Regents acts at their April meeting on the draft regulation. And that draft regulation, just as a reminder, has the requirement that the board votes any school board that has a mascot that's deemed problematic by the state would have to retire the mascot prior to June of this year. But the imagery that's associated with it, there would be sort of a 2-year phase out, and the expectation that the last of the transition would occur no later than the end of June in 2025. That's all. Any questions for me on this item, or shall I go on?
I guess it's more of a comment because I don't want to let the state funding issue go, and I hope you can keep your finger on that. I understand your point that others may have done this and we'd get a benefit because we waited, but at the same time, if I understand correctly, a couple of years back we made the decision not to do this, and now we are being required to do it. And if that's the case, I think there's a lot of good precedent out there that the state should be paying us for at least some of this.
We can certainly advocate for this. We have a new state legislator who represents us. I haven't had a chance to make the introductions yet, so I would certainly be willing to make an introduction. That's part of my role. And then certainly I try not to come to the first meeting with too long a laundry list of requests, but I certainly put this on his radar screen and talk with our existing legislators as well. All right, and then as we discussed enrollment, so I arrived at the school district in 2014, and at that time the district had been on almost a 10-year decline in enrollment that was consistent with the decline in enrollment that was happening countywide, and so Syosset seemed very typical in terms of the enrollment losses that were being experienced by other school districts. It did seem to me that enrollment loss was unlikely to continue. We also had a building that was very low in enrollment, and the question was, at what point might that building no longer be sustainable in its current form? So we commissioned an enrollment study in late 2014. That study concluded that enrollment would continue to decline. It just seemed inconsistent with what we were seeing in the housing market and conversations at the building levels with what the principals were seeing. So we commissioned a second study, And then that second study was updated because there was potential for 600 residential dwellings on the Syosset Park development that obviously never came to fruition, and instead we have the Amazon warehouse on the property that was in question at the time. But that was the occasion of the second and third enrollment studies that we did. And then we hired a group, Davis Demographics, because both of those previous studies proved to be not aggressive enough in really appreciating that there was going to be a trend change in enrollment, and instead of going on a downhill trend, we were going to go back on an uphill trend. An uphill trend that started first in Syosset. Most districts in Nassau County, I'd say more than 2/3 of districts in Nassau County were still declining in enrollment even when we turned the corner and started to grow again. In doing the enrollment study, one of the big challenges is, particularly in Syosset, is you're not dealing with a steady state group of students. There is a lot of enrollment due to new residents, particularly in kindergarten. And so the projections in lots of places are pretty straightforward because you know how many kids were born 5 years ago, and so you assume all of those kids are going to be kindergartners 5 years later. But when only 62% of your kindergarten class is comprised of kids who were born in the district 5 years ago, what you really find yourself doing is trying to predict how many kids will be in that typical 38%. And that turns out to be a lot harder to do because you have to guess at how many people are going to move to the district. And that's driven by the economy, it's driven by the housing market, it's driven by a number of factors that are sort of exogenous to the district. So again, just a little more of the history of this. The enrollment study that Davis Demographics did for us in 2020 proved to be remarkably accurate. The lines for the middle school and the high school, the projections and the actuals are almost dead on all the way through the study period up until present day. So that was pretty remarkable. What they couldn't predict was, as I started the presentation, the dip during the first year of the pandemic, followed by a big spike at the elementary level in the second year of the pandemic. So what we know about that spike is that's going to create a bubble at the elementary schools. That bubble is going to move through the middle schools, and eventually that bubble is going to find its way to the high school. So that part of the enrollment projection is pretty straightforward. We know we have a bubble. We know it's going to move through the middle and high schools. We know we have to plan at the middle and high schools for the students that are in that bubble. What's harder to project is whether that growth in elementary students is going to continue or if we've hit a new plateau with elementary students. So to burrow into this a little more, we've been looking at the two different populations. The red line on the top is the number of students who were live births in Syosset 5 years ago, matched up with the year that they would enter kindergarten 5 years later. And so we have the advantage of knowing what the last 5 years of live births look like, and they've averaged around 200 kids a year. And that contrasts with what it was for many years prior, which was closer to about 250 kids a year. So we know that we're seeing a drop in the number of live births, and that's actually consistent with what's happening in the county as well. In the county, live births are down about 3% over the course of the past 6 years. So the yellow or orange line on here represents the number of kindergartners that come as a result of moving to the district. And again, that's typically been about 38% of the kindergarten class. But just this last year, it went from being in the 30s to being almost 50%. So that's the gray line that kind of shoots up towards the end of the map. So this 1 year was a trend break, to be sure, and the challenge with the Davis Demographics methodology, and they have their own proprietary methodology, is they rely heavily on what happened in the immediate year. And so what that means is even though we know that the number of live births is down, say 50 kids, they're predicting that the number of new residents is going to be up by 50 kids every year through the course of the next 5 years. That assumption can be debated, but that assumption underlies all of the projections that come forward because kindergartners become first graders, become second graders, and eventually become most of the elementary building. So the last time we did the study, the Haber study, he did comparisons with other school districts to see if it is typical for school districts to have such high numbers of students come from new residents in the kindergarten class. And of the group of districts that were studied, if you took Syosset and Jericho out, which appear to be outliers, the other districts are roughly 1-to-1. In other words, the number of births equals the number of kindergartners. But Syosset and Jericho were unusual in that they were 38 and even 40% students due to new residents. So again, it shows that Syosset and Jericho were already outliers. Then having a 50-50 class is like an outlier of an outlier. And again, it's just, we look at the projections they give us, and we have to test the assumptions that underlie those projections. So I don't anticipate anybody would read this chart in this format. The reason why it's in here is because we post all these presentations online and want to make the data available online. And the reason for the banding on here is to sort of emphasize that the students are in a cohort. Every group of students is ultimately a graduating class, and by color coding them, you can kind of see how the class progresses through the years. One thing that we observe in Syosset is every year the grade levels at elementary and middle school tend to grow by about 4 or 5%. So what will happen is if there are 400 kids one year in, say, third grade, by the next year you'll see 420 kids in that grade as it grows 5%. That levels off when you get to high school, and that's kind of understandable. Most people don't want to move their kids in the middle of high school if they can avoid it because of the friend groups or the sports teams that they play on. So it drops down significantly by the time you get to high school. But we typically have graduating classes in the neighborhood of 550 kids, and we typically have kindergarten classes in the neighborhood of 400 kids. So over the course of time, the movement of people into Syosset causes growth, not just in the kindergarten, although that's where it's most dramatic, but over the course of time we see movement into Syosset, resulting in as many as, say, 150 students of growth in a graduating class from the course of their kindergarten to their 12th grade year. So projecting whether that trend is going to stay or change, even if it changes from 5% down to 4%, as you accumulate that over 12 years and compound it, it ends up having a big change on the out-year enrollments. All of which is to say, at middle school and high school, the projections are a lot more solid. At elementary school, because they're so reliant on kindergarten and because those classes are so volatile from new residents, they're the hardest ones to project. So by level, the enrollment at the elementary school, that's the top line on the left-hand chart, is expected to peak. It's essentially at its plateau and then drop. The middle school, that's the bottom line, is going to peak next as that bubble moves through the middle school, and then the last is the middle line, the gray line, that's the high school. The peak will go through the high school. The changes are harder to discern there because it's more gradual. So on the right-hand side, we just look at the change relative to 2019-20 school year. And here you can see that we're 1 year away from the peak for elementary school, 5-6 years away from the peak for middle school, 7-8 years away from the peak for high school. The peak for middle school will probably be about 13 or 14% above where we were in 2019. The peak for high school will probably be about 15% above. So those are substantial changes in enrollment to accommodate. So we have some time ahead of us to find the space that's necessary to accommodate those students. But our 3 secondary schools are all fairly full, and so they have some elasticity to manage further enrollment, but they don't have endless elasticity to accommodate this much enrollment change. So to just sort of summarize where we are with some major findings, the elementary school bubble is going to peak soon at about 5% above where we were in 2019. The middle school bubble will peak about 16% above where we were in 2019-20. And of that, most of the anticipated growth will occur at Southwoods. So just because of the feeder patterns and where the new residents have been, Davis is projecting more of the growth occurring at Southwoods than at HBT. And then the bubble will move to the high school, and again, fairly substantial peak. So as I've said all along, predicting at the elementary schools is the most volatile of all these exercises. And then when you take the elementary school band and slice it into 7 buildings, the numbers become even more volatile. But there are projections. You should think of these as having a much greater margin of error than the middle or high school projections. And 2 schools have already been growing faster than the others. Those are Berry Hill and Walt Whitman. Right now, the projection is that they will peak in the next year or so and then start to very slowly drop. 3 schools seem to be level. That's Bayless, Robbins Lane, and South Grove. They've had some changes in enrollment over the previous years, but the projections are for them to continue to be stable in their current enrollment. And 2 schools, Village and Willits, have already been losing enrollment and are projected to continue to lose enrollment. So, as I said before, the study has some limitations because we're so dependent on new residents to the community for so much of the enrollment projections, particularly in the early years. And that in turn means that we're kind of dependent on what changes occur in the housing market. So the area graph represents new home sales in the 2021 calendar year. The bar graph in front of it represents the same data for the 2022 calendar year, just to sort of illustrate that it is lower in 2022 than it was in 2021. And you can see the spike in home sales in the summer of 2021, and that seems to marry up with the spike in enrollment that we saw in the summer of 2021. So I'm certainly not somebody who is qualified to prognosticate about home sales, but it does seem like there is some correlation between the housing market and new registration here. And so whatever moderation in the housing market may continue, may also have a moderating effect on some of these enrollment projections that we've seen in the study. And again, as I said, there are some methodological choices that Davis Demographics makes that I think carry with them some, data risks in terms of they feel very confident in their methodology, but I just think that it's important to understand what those methodological choices imply in terms of the solidity of the data. So certainly based on this enrollment projection, we're in a position now where we can begin to talk about what the facilities needs would be, certainly at the secondary schools, to accommodate the anticipated growth, but also at the elementary schools, both because we have just facilities needs with the existing physical plant, but also as we think about what enrollment changes may be coming. So I'm happy to take board questions on this as well.
That was a lot. Thank you so much. And I'll use your word burrow because I've been burrowing through these projections and even the older studies, the Faber study, the earlier Davis study. And the thing that jumps out at me most is this difference or this distinguishing new residents versus live births. This seems to be easier if everything's based on the birth rate. It seems to be near impossible if we're basing it on new residents. I mean, some of the studies are looking at home sales, and they're making decisions, or they're using projections that are based on what they think the home sales are going to be to tell us how many kids are going to be in our schools. And I think there's very little reliability, and I'm no expert in this, but I am much less confident in the numbers and much more nervous about some of these projections, like when you talk about 14% in 2030 at the high school, and we're already pretty much at capacity at our secondary schools. And I'm thinking, you're right, in the last thing you said is, okay, now it's time to start to talk about facilities. And what's the best way to do that? And what's the best way to get the 9 of us really in depth with a lot of this? And I'm wondering if we should be having monthly meetings on facilities only, at least having some report from you every month, maybe establish a subcommittee of board members to meet with Mr. Hamilton and Dr. Rufo, the engineers. There's a lot that I think we need to learn, and we need to learn it quickly so we can start putting pen to paper on some of these projects. I mean, that's just my initial thinking, and I don't mean to sound dire, but, you know, Jericho and Syosset are such an anomaly here in these numbers that to rely on this in any way without some of a, you know, what I'd like to see would be a low, a medium, and a high, right? The 14%, can it be 19% in 10 years? Because then we may have a real problem. And, you know, the projections don't do that and the studies don't do that. So we almost have to get ahead of the game here. So that's just my thinking. I have no questions in there.
If I could just react to some of that thinking and kind of sketch out how I was anticipating working with the board on this. So we are required by law to do every year what are called annual visual inspections. We are finalizing that soon. That won't tell us what you need for facilities in the future to accommodate growth, but what it will tell you is what are the facilities needs of the existing physical plant that you have. Are there furnaces that are kind of at the end of their life? Are there places where the roof needs repair, et cetera? So in my mind, both of these conversations are sort of married together because in the end, you'll end up wanting to fix all of your facilities issues at the same time, your need for space and your need to repair the facilities in the existing physical plant that you have. So that will also conclude shortly, and we'll start engaging the board as a whole on some of those facilities needs, and then work through a process of identifying priorities and making plans. I certainly understand wanting to have a sense of what the plus minus is in the enrollment projection. I think on the high side, there's a limitation, a natural limitation, which is basically driven by how much housing stock is simply available. So there's going to be a limitation in just how many families can live in the community at the same time. So certainly what we saw in the 2015 change was a lot of homes that turned over and were, my understanding, owned by people who were residents of the district but no longer had kids. And there's been a lot of turnover in that sort of market space. I think we could do some research as to whether that turnover is exhausted, and that might be helpful in order to help us understand. Some of that we could probably do internally because we have data on every house in the district that has ever had a kid. So we could probably identify what proportion of the residential properties are yielding students right now, and probably do that as an historical average going back for quite a few years. The second is, at least in terms of the year-to-year growth, that 4 to 5% growth from year to year has been remarkably stable for years and years. So what's been unstable is this kindergarten projection and that 1 year spike. But the other numbers, I have a lot more confidence in the secondary school projections because I've replicated what is the typical enrollment projection analysis myself with our data every year since I've gotten here. And that 4 to 5% year-to-year growth in the class from 400 kindergartners to 550 at the high school has been very stable.
So putting aside the unknowns about how many kids are coming into kindergarten, with the bubble that we know that's working its way through, you know, the grades, and the high school and middle schools being stretched so thin, just taking that alone, do the buildings have the ability to stretch to accommodate those alone? Or would that in and of itself put all the facilities over the edge?
I think it would be very challenging for the secondary school projections at HBT will not tax HBT. They've experienced their growth, they're sort of plateaued at this point, and obviously they're fitting in the building today. So if they stay at this plateau, HBT is not the issue. The growth the larger growth is projected to be at Southwoods, and yes, Southwoods will need additional space in order to accommodate that growth. Same thing with the high school. There are, for rough justice numbers, about 100 classrooms at the high school, and I would say, and Dr. Durante will undoubtedly correct me tomorrow, that 9 periods of the day, you probably have 6 or 7 periods where all 100 rooms are in use. So during the lunch periods, maybe 1 or 2 rooms would not be used, but that's because you're also having lunch periods. So again, I think it would be very challenging to really start to, I'm sure there are classes that have 18 kids and could take a 19th or take a 20th kid. So there is some elasticity that the building still has to be able to accept that growth. But I think what would end up happening as a progression would be there would be some electives that couldn't run because we would need to have more core classes to accommodate more students. So the program would probably shrink in order to accommodate the growth first. And then you'd just get to a point where even that would not be a strategy that you could pursue any further.
I remember from previous demographic studies that it broke down and where the people are moving from. A lot of them were from NASA, a lot of them were from New York City, and some from out of state. And is there an increase that we see in Syosset from international? And is that significant?
I'm going to give you what I remember off the top of my head, and then I'm going to use this time to stall while Mr. Escobar, if he knows off the top of his head, can answer. The spike that we had in the summer of 2021 was about 300 kids. About 2/3 of those kids came from the New York City school system. Of the remaining 100 or so kids, I would say it was a third, a third, a third. A third rest of state, a third out of state, maybe a third out of country. But that summer was an unusual summer. And what we've seen since looks much more like a very typical amount of students who are coming in and out of the district. And that summer spike, even though the summer is when we noticed it, it continued throughout that school year. We had another 161 registrations. We had 45 students exit the school during that 21-22 school year. So net increase of yet another 45 students. So 344 students in the district altogether in that 2021 school year. But so that got us to like 68-55 or something, and we're at 68-90 now. So it hasn't grown much since. But that was the big spike, was all last year. Mr. Escobar, do you have any more updated information on where people are coming from?
No, I would say that the last year, after that anomaly that you spoke about, the 21-22 year, it's pretty much been level. Some from coming in from like Queens and Brooklyn, and some just moving into the district. But nothing like we had that one year where we had that huge number coming in from the city.
Not that I believed we should wait to make decisions, but if your 21 was a big spike and 22 was more along the lines of what you expected, and does it make sense to kind of look at where September goes before we invest so heavily into, we should expand and obviously have room for the bubble that we have going through, but before we start to plan for a lot of these projections, take into account 21 and kind of run with that, and before we start running in that direction, should we see kind of what happens another year to say maybe we have to adjust the expectations back down? And it wasn't an anomaly. Oh, I can't. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it'll be a natural consequence of how long it takes to do this kind of work that's going to happen anyway. So we'll start to really burrow into the AVI estimates. We'll start to do some estimates on what it would cost from a space perspective to accommodate all of this. I don't think that you are going to be ready as a board to make a decision before we end up seeing what ends up happening in the fall. So I think those things are going to happen on a parallel track, and if you need to course correct at some point in the fall, you're not going to have already committed to a plan of action that you can't still tweak at that point.
So maybe I wasn't clear. We're not talking about the bubble. That is my focus when I look at this. So while I may not be enamored by the way these projections were made when they're not using live births because they're using basically home sales, that bubble seems to be something, and I think Susan said it when she asked you whether or not you thought the secondary schools could handle this bubble as projected in here. And I didn't get it's fine, we'll be good to go. So it seems like right now we've got to do something. When I say do something, I don't mean sit in a room and start signing off on things. I'm saying we got to talk about it and make sure we know where we're going to be in a year and 2 years and 3 years. And then maybe Lynn will be right and everything will slow down and we'll just need some tweaks to get through that bubble.
Right. I think absent some sort of retrenchment in enrollment, the bubble is going to be the bubble. So we're going to have to deal with the bubble no matter what. I think the only question is, does the bubble have friends, or is the bubble just the bubble?
So I want to try and summarize what I thought I heard. It seems to me from reviewing the projections that the middle schools and the high schools are in the 3 to 7 year time frame are going to be really up against it, essentially, for space. And when I was looking at the square footage statistics of the buildings, it seems like Southwoods actually has a decent amount of square footage, but it must be occupied with other non-classroom uses. And so that's potentially something that we should probably all talk about in future. But there doesn't seem to be physical space to accommodate the number of children that are projected to be going through the secondary schools in the 3 to 7 year period from what I can see and from what you're describing. Putting aside whether or not the elementary school projections are accurate or whether they're going to be proved to be inaccurate and complicate the problems even more, just put that aside for a second. The middle school and high school seem like we need physical space to accommodate those students in the 3 to 7 year time frame, and it feels like the clock is really ticking. So I don't know that waiting till September to start drawing up plans feels like a good use of incremental information, because it seems like that part is immutable in future. So debating the elementary school enrollment is, I think, a much more esoteric conversation, which probably doesn't need to be happening here. But the actual creation of additional space feels like, whether it's renting space or building in a different building, or adding on to existing buildings, or moving people out of buildings to create educational space, like that really needs to be the focus, I feel like, for the 3 to 5 year. And then, Brian, whether or not, and Lynn, whether or not we're going to have elementary school problems in addition. I have a number of methodological concerns about the short-term projections for the elementary schools, which I don't want to do that now, but those feel like those conversations need to begin in earnest, like immediately.
Yeah, I would agree with your summary. And the point I was making to Lynn was not that we would delay, but that is, in watching lots and lots of school districts go through this exercise, it just takes time. And so even, it's not that we're going to drag our feet until September. Even if we decide to go full speed ahead, in September you're not going to have anything final yet. So you won't have committed yourself to something you can't still course correct from by the time September rolls around.
The timeline is so long to be able to get anything done, and it seems even 3 years is going to be a hard timeline to meet with planning, going through the State Department, getting approval, getting permits, but all that stuff. What kind of interim, temporary, like Jack said, which I agree with everything Jack said about moving people out or renting space, or, what kind of things do we have to do? Because, we can't not have electives run, and we can't end programs that have been here and change the academic and educational opportunities that we've always offered our kids. So what kind of solutions can we think of to be able to keep our standard of academics going? Because unless I'm not realizing the timeline, 3 years is tight.
Yeah, that's going to be the work that we have to do as a team to get back to you with some options to consider.
Sorry, just one more thing. It not only affects facilities, but it also affects the people we have to hire and the things that we have to do. Is that also going to be accounted for in the studies that we do and costs and things like that?
So what the district does is we staff to need, and we staff to actual. So what does that mean? It means actually very shortly, Dr. Curry, Mr. Escobar are going to start meeting with each of the individual building principals and going through staffing meetings. And what those look like is they will nose count the number of kids that are going to be in every last section of every elective at every secondary school to see exactly how many sections there are going to be, how many teachers are going to be needed for each of those sections. They will start to collect the number of teachers who have announced or notified us that they intend to retire. And all of that will be fed into a process of identifying what staffing needs we have for the fall. So we won't have to do projections for staffing for 2 years from now. It will be a natural consequence of what will happen the spring before that fall. We want to do that process early enough in the spring that we are hiring while the pool is still full of great candidates. So we don't want to be the last district to go looking in the pool and see who's left. We want to be as early as possible, but we don't want to be so early that we don't know who the kids are that are going to be there that fall. So I do think we have the timing well calibrated in terms of when we do staffing meetings, but we're literally staffing to the 0.1 FTE for every certification, so 1/10 of one employee. And we have lots of people here who are not full-time employees because they're taking 0.3 or 0.4 of a job in order to get some time teaching, even if it's not a full-time job here. And we'll staff the entire district that way in the spring, every year going forward.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rogers, for your presentation and also for answering all the questions. I know facilities is a big thing, and this isn't the last time we'll be discussing it, obviously. For the Board of Education update, we just wanted to make an announcement that we have an extra meeting that's planned on January 24th of this month. And for this extra meeting, the board would like to try to do something different that we've never done before, which is to host a workshop. The workshop will be held here at Southwoods Auditorium. However, there will be no audience participation at this workshop, but the community is welcome to sit in and just take a listen as to what's going on during our discussion. So we just wanted to give the community the update for January 24th, and that'll be in a couple of weeks. There are no legislative items on the agenda, so the next part would be audience to the public. For audience to the public, we welcome the community attendance at our meetings. The audience to the public affords the residents of the district the opportunity to address the Board of Education. Residents must enter their full name and address into the registrar located at the microphone before they speak. Each resident will have 4 minutes to address the board. The board will not permit polling of board members by speakers. After every resident who is wishing to speak has had an opportunity to do so, the Board of Education and/or administration will do their best to provide responses to residents' questions or comments. After every resident has had a chance to speak, the chair may recognize residents who wish to address the board a second time after their initial 4-minute turn. No speaker is permitted to address issues concerning an individual student or staff member. And all in attendance at the Board of Education public meeting must conduct themselves in a respectful manner. So we're opening up the podium for anybody who wishes to speak or ask any questions.
Hi, good evening. It's Tanya Getz, and I'm a resident of Syosset, and my husband's a 76 graduate of Syosset High School. My brother-in-law is 83, and my daughter is 2021, and I have a son in 9th grade. I am here because the first time I came to speak at the Board of Ed was in 2017 during my daughter's freshman year to ask for a survey about the transition, because I felt the transition between middle school and high school was, to use Betty Davis's words, fasten your seatbelts, you were in for a bumpy ride. And what I wanted to say was that I had a 9th grader this time round who began the transition meetings in 8th grade, and I have found that the district has made incredible progress in the transition between 8th and 9th grade. And so I wanted to thank Dr. Rogers, his administration, Dr. Durante, everybody who was involved, and the board members who helped make that happen. It's a huge difference. Really, greatly appreciated. But like anything else, I'm a big fan of Dr. Gwande and Everything Can Be Better. Wrote a book with that title. And so I wanted to identify a few other issues that I think could still be improved. And to some degree, they relate to the developmental differences between children, which was alluded to earlier by both our athletics director and by Dr. Rogers himself. Ms. Burgett, both times my children entered middle school, would have a slide show on her orientation, the principal of Southwood Middle School, and it would be the 6th grader. And then the 6th grader was very short, and then the 8th grader next to them, much taller, and she'd say, "This is what we do here." But I know, and I teach college freshmen at CUNY for the past 23 years, I know that actually there are students who enter 6th grade at that small height and then don't grow much. And then in fact, developmental stages are very significantly different based on individuals. And that if you look at from straight science, and I used to work at Scientific American magazine, you know, the Tanner stages, which are the stages of development into adulthood, some children, some adolescents will not achieve those until junior or senior year of high school, that final 5th stage. And with males, not until maybe freshman or sophomore year of high school. So you have a wide variety. And so I think this plays into discussions that you have about your timing of your start of the high school, because, you know, some students will need more sleep than others. It depends on where they are, right, developmentally. So I think that until the the issue of the high school start time is addressed, this becomes an advisement issue and a guidance issue. You already have a lot of stuff that has been done to put things out there. But I think, and I alluded to this once before, that you still need to look at your pedagogical structures. And so, and your learning management systems. Right now you're using Canvas, but there are other alternatives that are coming down the pike. Many colleges, including CUNY and SUNY, are switching to Brightspace. And those have a lot of, Brightspace seems to have a lot of advantages with regard to accessibility for all school populations. And also, okay, I'm done. All right, I'm going to come back. Hopefully, I can.
Thank you, Ms. Getz. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak or ask questions? Then I invite you back up if you want to take another 4 minutes. Okay.
Okay, so I do think it's worthwhile looking at some of these new options, but also things like midnight deadlines for assignments, which was being heavily used when my daughter was there in the honors cohort and things like that. I think those really need to be looked at because I don't think they're appropriate for students at, the ages of 14 and 15. I think bedtimes, should be earlier than that. I don't think that students should be working until midnight for homework. I think many of them are, especially in the honors cohort, but I don't think that's healthy. And I think, the CDC and things like that, that's one of the things that, they're talking about lack of sleep in adolescence and how that is affecting all kinds of health issues. So that's a pedagogical thing that's happening because now with the systems, you can set those deadlines. And Canvas is what you're using now. But I think also some of the other things is that I think the advisement in terms of the guidance sessions that are having, they offer pathways, right, and a lot of different options. But one thing I don't think that's made clear enough to parents is that there is a lot of room to play. Our current students, I know my daughter, who's now a sophomore, she graduated. If she had gone to, let's say, a state school or something like that, she would have entered as a middle sophomore, but she would have had enough credits through AP exams and things like that to enter with possibly 30 credits, all right, 3 and 4. And so that reflects the fact that you do have students who start very early as freshman year in AP, right? And in 8th and 9th grade, you do an accelerated programs. And so Syosset students basically are entering with a lot of college credits, but not many colleges accept all those credits, right? And so it's possible to slow it down a little bit in high school in 9th grade by opening up a free period. You don't have to pack your whole day. You could have lunch and then, so there's a lot of ways to get that early time frame even before you wind up, making your start time later. I also think that when we talk about homework load, that's something that needs to be looked at in the overall picture of a student, and that's different for each student. And so I think that needs to be talked about as well, as what is a student doing outside of the classroom? Well, if they're starting on track team, and some of these major things, and they're participating in sports and maybe not getting home till 9 p.m. if they've gone on a bus, then that needs to be taken into account in terms of how their schedule is set up, right? Maybe they don't take a full honors course load and everything. So that's what I kind of would love to see the discussion being a little, not just what they can take, but maybe what their other things that they're doing are. I think that's all I wanted to mention about that. But I did want to open up another conversation that very much relates to the younger group and set, which is that there's been a recent American Public Media report called Sold a Story, which talks about the teacher's reading and writing workshop, which is used in the Syosset School District. And I've lost my 4 minutes again, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Getz. Does anybody else want to come up and speak? Okay, this will end audience to the public.
First of all, Ms. Getz, I want to thank you for the kind compliment. We did put an awful lot of energy into what we call the 8-Go-9 transition and came up with a lot of ideas for how we could improve it. We were hoping to get a better match between kids' aptitudes and interests and what they ended up doing as freshmen when they got to high school, and hopefully make their experience at high school a smoother transition and a happier one as freshmen. We were also trying to accomplish some better gender balance in a lot of the courses that we saw at the high school that were imbalanced, and we suspected that there was probably some informational gaps that were occurring in that 8-Go-9 transition that could be improved that would help with the gender balance at the high school as well. So it's really nice to be recognized, so I really appreciate that. On the subject of learning and management systems, the district did a big old jump into the deep end during the pandemic, and so many of our teachers learned Google Classroom very quickly out of necessity. And the advantage of Google Classroom is that it works well with the Google suite of tools that we make available to kids and the Chromebooks that we provide for them. And so having all of those things in the same family has its advantages. Has some disadvantages too. It's not as flexible or as powerful as Canvas. So the high school, brave as they are, have embarked on a Canvas pilot program and they have a cohort of teachers who have been ambitiously testing Canvas. So that's raised the question of whether we should convert the whole high school to the same learning management system to simplify things for kids, but there would be, of course, major training and sort of an unsettling transition for teachers who might not be as familiar with Canvas. And so far, our assessment has been the juice ain't worth the squeeze, to quote my old friends in government. So I'm curious to learn about Brightspace, and I will take it as a helpful tip. And so we'll pass that along to the folks who work more closely with this, and we'll investigate it. And if there was a product out there that could marry the simplicity of use that we experienced with Google Classroom with the power and flexibility of a tool like Canvas, and maybe even set our students up for success so that they were already familiar with the tool before they got to colleges, to me that'd be a triple win. So we'll look at it. Thanks for the tip. In terms of advisement and the pathways, parenthetically, one of the things that we've been trying to do is advance the concept of on-ramps and off-ramps. So if you were to look at the high school course catalog from, say, 6 or 7 years ago, it would have said that this is the honors track in math. You take this class, you take this class, you take this class, it results in that class. What we're trying to do now is not necessarily lock kids in so that if they want to take, as a senior, when presumably they're developmentally ready, the most challenging courses we offer, they must also take the most challenging courses we offer as freshmen. That may seem limiting, so we're trying to create on-ramps and off-ramps so students can take those more challenging courses later in their high school without having to turn their freshman year into the most demanding year of their lives. So will I say that that transition is complete? No. But do I think that we've made some substantial progress on the way there? I do. And so I'm glad to see that we're in a similar place. The homework question has come up a number of times since I've been here in my 9th year now, and we did do an extensive deep dive in, I'm going to say 2015, 2016. We surveyed the entire student body at the high school. We did a focus group with teachers. This was the subject of a bunch of PTA meetings. And the conclusion at the end of all of that ended up not being all that surprising. The students that had the most homework were the students who took the most AP classes. It's a shocker, I know. And then we talked to students about that and said, well, what do you think? And they said, well, we want to take the AP classes and we want to be successful in them. And if this is the workload that is necessary to get there, then that's a choice we've made for ourselves. I do think that we can probably do a better job of describing what exactly that means in terms of amount. And I think it's always good to have a prairie fire every few years with homework to see how much of it is really advancing the learning and how much of it is just sort of repeating things for understanding's sake. And so it's always good to renew that conversation because it ends up serving the same purpose as a prairie fire to just clear out some dead wood. And I'm certainly familiar with some of the criticisms that have been leveled at the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. Certainly, the folks that are talking about the science of reading would like to see heavier emphasis on phonics. I think back to the developmental conversation that we had earlier, there's a developmental conversation around English language acquisition as well. And some kids are further along than others. And some kids need phonics in order to make their first acquisition. Other kids need phonics because for them it's a remedial program. But for students who have already acquired really the reading skills that they need, getting stuck in something that could be more of a remedial approach is kind of a waste of their time, and so we want them to be able to go fast and far. What I would say is there's no program that shouldn't be re-examined, but since we adopted more, the district has always, before I got here, used units of study from the Reading and Writing Project, but since we became more involved in the professional development that comes along with the TC program, the English language arts scores in the district have just gone up and up and up. So we're getting the results that we had looked for, but that doesn't mean that we can't continue to tweak the program. And even though the Reading and Writing Project it has a phonics unit, not a heavy emphasis on phonics, as some other programs do. The district has a number of phonics programs that we use, and we count on our teachers to identify the kids that need that phonics support in order to be successful. One thing that has been an advantage of TC is that TC makes a lot of literature available to school districts, titles for us to use. And TC has put a lot of emphasis in recent years on trying to find titles by diverse authors, titles that have diverse characters, not just in supporting roles, but in main character roles, and titles where those diverse characters are in main roles, but they're not necessarily their role is not necessarily tied to their ethnicity. So it would take a tremendous amount of effort for us to plow through tons and tons of literature in order to find additional titles that, in addition to the ones that we already know and love, expand the breadth of our classroom library so that they include more diverse materials. So there are advantages that come along with it, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at how it can be enhanced by things that we add to it, or things and how they may change over the course of time as well. I understand TC has responded to some of these critiques as well, and they have some ideas about how their own phonics instruction can be enhanced. But I appreciate you initiating that conversation, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. The board has unfinished business from last month's meeting. The use of the Native American team name and mascot. We will be voting on it at our February 6th Board of Education meeting. In the meantime, does anybody have any comments or questions before we move on? Question?
I'm just not sure, what does that mean we're voting on it at our February 6th meeting?
So Mr. Rotolo was going to speak about this a little bit more extensively tonight, but at some point you have to put a resolution in front of the board so you can decide whether you want to retire the mascot or not. So we have this unfinished business item. Typically when there's unfinished business on the board agenda, you can continue your discussion from the previous meeting. If there's no further discussion, what the board has typically done is proposed a resolution. What Mr. Rotolo and Ms. Kashia didn't want to do in their agenda setting meeting with me was startle everybody by having a resolution on a board agenda that no one was anticipating. So the conversation was about trying to schedule when that vote would occur, and that was, how we find ourselves here.
So why do we need to vote on February 6th when we don't need to make a decision until June?
So we have to make the vote, but we also have to have, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm incorrect, that we need also to submit a plan of action along with it. And if we vote later in the year, like in June, it would be very difficult to have a plan of action to submit along with the retirement, the announcement to the state. Am I correct or no in that? Sorry.
I don't think that we'll need a formal plan, but I do think that you'll need to have board action of one kind or another before the end of the school year. So the question is really the board's as to when you want to schedule that vote.
Maybe this is a hyper-technical legal question, but should we be voting before the action is final? Before the state has actually adopted this in April or May?
So the state already has a memo from the middle of November saying that we must. So in my world, if I get a memo from the Deputy Commissioner of Education, that is as good as law. So I believe that what the regents are doing is they are reinforcing that memo by passing a regulation that parallels the memo. But I don't think that the memo itself does not have the force of law without the regent's action, from my perspective. It would be like me as superintendent saying to somebody in the building, this is how we're going to do things. And then the board may adopt a policy subsequent to that that reinforces it, but it's still my directive to the buildings that this is going to be done in a certain way.
Maybe we should, there's only 7 of us here tonight, so maybe we should just wait until next month to decide when we want to vote, and then either vote the month after or vote in May. And if Lisa's right, and we do need to do more than just vote to say we will do something within the next 2 years, which is what my understanding was, we can decide it then.
Because the other thought on that too was that if we're putting together a committee to, we have to figure out who's going to be on the committee, how the committee's going to run. It's a process. So we figured by voting on in February, it gives us the later part of the school year to have some type of action plan to get started. But we can totally take it off next month and discuss it. If we want to put it on further as a discussion item, we can absolutely do that and then vote on it on the March meeting. I'm welcoming feedback on anybody's thoughts on that.
Is there benefit in delaying the resolution?
I don't know.
I don't know of any advantage that would happen. The hypothesizing, the only thing that we would know is that the state budget process would be a little bit further along, but the state budget process won't be resolved until April 1 at the earliest. So I don't know that 1 month reveals anything about the potential for state funding. You would have to wait several months in order for that to really be meaningful.
And our resolution and voting is not going to change what the state does and the benefit that we may get from the state anyway, right?
Like I said, I don't want to give you false optimism about the possibility of state funding. We can certainly keep the conversation alive with the people who represent us. I don't anticipate the memo from November going away. I don't anticipate the regents failing to adopt their resolution in April. So it's really a question for you as to, at what point you want to address this issue in a more permanent way.
So would we want to put it on as a discussion item for next month? I mean, we figured we discussed it last month, and then we're looking to, in our minds, in order to move forward with putting together a committee and figuring out the next steps, the logical thing would be to have the vote so that you can move forward. So.
I guess what committee are we putting together? I guess what I thought that we were going to do, and this may be my misapprehension, was that the administration was going to put together a feedback mechanism to gather feedback from outside about what kind of potential mascot and what. So I'm just not sure what that needs a committee of the board. Is it a committee of the board? I'm just not following.
Well, this is one of those things where you constrained by any sort of obligatory process. So it can be whatever process you as a board want to follow. So you may choose to have a committee of people who represent parents and represent kids and represent maybe athletic teams, who would be tasked with creating a process for identifying what a successor mascot might be, or you might task the administration with coming up with some sort of process. You haven't decided how you want to proceed. So I'm looking to the board for some direction as to how you'd like us to proceed. I can certainly outline for you how the district proceeded 20 years ago when the mascot was briefly retired, and what that process looked like and the kinds of committees that were put into place. You may choose to replicate that, or you may choose to do it in a different way. This is really a place where we would take direction from the board on how you'd want us to proceed on your behalf.
You raise a good point. I feel like a lot that will go into this that at least I haven't thought about yet, and maybe the way to do that is to have this on as whether it's a discussion item or Dr. Rogers, you report to us during the superintendent's report what our options are, and maybe we wrap everything up into a resolution. And the only reason, and this may be outrageous, that I would think about waiting purposefully is if there was any chance that there would be action by maybe other districts that were not pleased with this, that applied pressure on the state, and maybe there would be an opportunity for funding. I'm beating a dead horse about this concept that I think they're going to pay for this, but we may be in a unique position where we have a lot with the word Braves on it throughout this district in our weight rooms, and we're not asking for money so that parents can get their shirts reimbursed. We're asking for money for things we have to do. So if there was any chance, and this is the first time I'm hearing about potentially voting on it quickly, I guess I made the same assumption Jack made, that we'd be voting in June. It doesn't matter, but we might as well just wrap everything up. But again, I think it's just the 7 of us here tonight, so I don't know if it's worth even discussing when we're voting. We probably could vote next month regardless. If it's a discussion item, we could have a resolution ready.
Okay, so then for next month, we'll put it on as a discussion item again. Maybe Dr. Rogers could have some options for us as a board based on what had happened prior in the district 20 years ago, and any other ideas that maybe the administration comes up with, how we can move forward. And then our vote would just be to retire the mascot next month, but we do not have to move forward next month with committee or what we're looking to do with that. We can discuss that and then figure that out the following month for argument's sake, if everybody's okay with that. Brian? Sorry.
Dr. Rogers, I guess it's a question for you. I mean, we have a very early February meeting. So, I mean, I'm not, the purpose of this was not to say, hey, you've got 3.5 weeks to get us everything we want before we vote on this. It does seem like we have until June, so whatever amount of time you have to give us the options and the possible committees and what we're going to say to the public and whether we're going to solicit feedback and how we're going to handle potentially petitioning the state for money, I don't want to make you have to do that in 3 or 4 weeks.
I appreciate your kindness. Whatever the board needs to move its work along, I'm happy to do, as you know. So if you want to have another discussion, we can certainly have a resolution prepared. Just on something this sensitive, typically what the board has always done is put its agenda on the Friday, made its agenda public to the community on Friday night so that the community knows what the board would be doing. So I'm reluctant to have a resolution all set to go that didn't appear on an agenda so that the public knew that it was going to happen. So Again, if it was just to show up on a Friday night before a board meeting and there wasn't some sort of conversation to let people know to anticipate that, and somebody who was interested in speaking on the topic wouldn't know to come to a board meeting. So the conversation with Ms. Kashia and Mr. Rotolo was what's the right way to be as transparent about this process as possible. But there's certainly no obligation to do it next month. I think by next month I would be able to describe the process that we used 20 years ago. There's a handful of school districts in New York that have retired their mascots more recently. I could read a couple of newspaper articles and summarize them for you fairly quickly about what other school districts have done. So if you decide to have this as a discussion item next month and not necessarily a resolution yet, then I could present you with some options for you to consider about how other school districts have made transitions. I kind of look to you for whatever it is you want from us.
I'm just a little confused. I just want to clarify. Is the vote to retire the mascot is a separate vote from the how we want to proceed? They're not necessarily tied together, right? They're two separate. So the vote is one thing, and then deciding how you want to move forward is another? Sorry. I don't know if that changes what other people are thinking. Just wanted to clarify.
So the vote to retire the mascot is one thing, and then separate from that would be our discussion as to how we want to proceed in getting community involvement in how to move forward with choosing a new mascot and a name and whatnot. That they're two separate things, but the thought process behind it is, in order to kind of move forward with that process, it just seems to make sense to vote on the retirement of the mascot first and then proceed forward with the discussion of what the next steps are. So if Dr. Rogers can get some information for us ready for next month, if we're okay with doing the vote on the retiring, then next month we would just be gathering information with how to get, different ways that we could get community involvement. We can discuss that, think about it, and then figure that out. At least we have time for the rest of the school year, because by that time we have a few months left of the school year.
I'm going to go in circles, and I apologize because it's getting late. It doesn't seem it matters when we vote and do a resolution. I would much rather come back next month and the month after and talk about facilities and our studies and not rush to start talking about how we're changing a mascot that we have 2.5 years to change. So I sort of take back what I'm saying. If there's no downside financially to voting quickly, then it doesn't matter. We're going to vote for this resolution that's going to look the exact same next month as in June. But then don't rush to get back to us with all of our options for the February meeting, Dr. Rogers. And when you're ready, we'll put it on for a discussion item for the how we're going to do this for later, maybe even next year. I mean, there's no rush anymore once we do the resolution, correct?
But we have to, go ahead, I'll let you. There has to be some type of plan.
The only deadline you have is the requirement by the state to vote to retire the mascot by the end of this school year, June 30. So that's the only deadline. Once that vacuum is created, I think there will certainly be wondering about what the successor is. Washington had the Washington football team for a couple of years, but I don't know that a school district would like to live in a vacuum like that. So in the end of June, you lose the opportunity to engage students in a conversation. So I think as a board, I would advise you to calibrate when you make the decision in such a way that students will be meaningfully engaged in the process of what might the successor be before you lose them altogether. So that would be a thought in my mind that would be a downside to waiting, is that students wouldn't be meaningfully engaged into the fall, and then decision wouldn't be made until well into the school year. You'd go a year without some sort of mascot or image for kids to kind of hold on to as a sense of identity. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the process needs that amount of time. Or students might wish to move more quickly and have some sense of identity. And so I do think it would be difficult to ask a committee to start to work on something in the absence of action by the board. I think the committee would say, what are we doing here? Is the board serious or not serious? So in my own mind, these two things seem to follow one another logically. And it's really a question of how quickly you want to move.
So the only, and I at the risk of making myself very unpopular with the board, more so than normal, it sounds like the only feedback we're asking for out loud in the community is what to change the mascot to, not whether or not we should be changing it. Well, I mean, in principle, I don't, my opinions about this are sort of slightly beside the point, but let's assume for the moment that some outrageous number of folks came back and surprised all of us and said 90% of the town doesn't want to change the mascot, and they're willing to eat $25 million a year not to do it. That's not on me to make that call. I guess I just don't understand why we decided not to ask.
So one thing boards can't do is something called an advisory referendum, which is as board members, you are elected to represent the public, and you are not to survey the public to tell you what to do. So those are called advisory referenda. They're forbidden. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't be going out and getting feedback from the public, but the typical places where boards get feedback are reports that are done, reports by communications to the community, obviously audience to the public, and that's where the dialogue comes from. But ultimately, board members, and the reason against advisory referenda, what the commissioners ruled in the past on advisory referenda, is that members of the board are better positioned to weigh the pros and cons because they're more involved and have more information about the business of the district, and therefore the whole point of representative government is for individuals to be more enmeshed in what's going on so they can make decisions on behalf of the constituents that they represent. So I would be leery of doing something that looked like a survey, because that would get close to being an advisory referenda, and that would be something that the commissioner would at the very least scold the school district for.
All right, the fifth time. So to summarize, are we all in agreement that we are going to put this on as a resolution next month with no discussion item and give Dr. Rogers time to come back to us with how he sees this unfolding?
I leave it up to Dr. Rogers. If that's not enough time to come back, or you would like more time, we have no problem to give you more time either. If we want to come back to this in March and we vote on it in next month's meeting so we can move forward, that's fine too. I can leave that up to you. Is that enough time for you? I think that's what Brian's asking, right? Do you have enough time in the next few weeks? Is that what you're asking?
Dr. Rogers, I think the original thing, now that we've wasted 15 minutes, and I apologize because I'm the source of it, was to come back next month, vote, do nothing else. And then at some point, maybe in March, we would have another discussion item with the how.
So I appreciate being offered, but I'm not going to make this decision for you. So here's what I would suggest to you to consider. If you have board members who feel like they're not ready to vote on this yet, then it sounds to me like you still need more discussion on this topic. Certainly tonight, questions have been raised. we're having this conversation at 11 o'clock at night. And I don't sense that there's unanimity on the board as to how to proceed, even procedurally, on how to move forward with this. So my advice would be not to worry about whether I don't have enough time to get stuff done. I'll get stuff done. But if you're not ready as a board, just even from a process perspective, then I do think you have the luxury of a little bit of time before you lose the opportunity to involve kids in this conversation. But if you choose to wait longer, then now you know what the pros and cons will be of waiting longer. You might know a little bit more about the state budget process, but you'll constrain your opportunity to engage kids. But what I'm observing from this conversation is you have two colleagues missing through no fault of their own tonight, and they're not getting the benefit of this conversation. So, perhaps this conversation needs to occur when you can all be part of it. So that would argue for having another conversation next month. I would just suggest that when you are ready to put this resolution in front of yourself, you make some sort of announcement to the community so they're not startled by it when it appears on a Friday agenda.
That would mean not putting the resolution on for February, putting it on as a further discussion item. Dr. Rogers could perhaps come back with some ideas, and then we put it on as a resolution for the March meeting and move forward from there. Are we happy with that? This way we can move forward. Is everybody okay with that idea? It will go on as a March vote with some information next month and a continued discussion item? Okay. Okay, so that's what we'll do then. Okay. The following is new business. A items, the approval of staff changes. A1 is the approval of staff changes. Could I have a motion, please? Brian, seconded by Shani. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. A2 is the approval of the 2022-2023 stipends and hourly rates. Could I have a motion, please? Susan, seconded by Brian. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. B items. B1 is the approval of the Committee on Special Education recommendations. Could I have a motion, please? Lynn, seconded by Shawnee. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, B2 is the approval of Committee on Preschool Special Education recommendations. Could I get a motion, please? Susan, seconded by Shawnee. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. B3 is the second reading of policies, student wellness and nutrition, the claims auditor, and expense reimbursement. Could I have a motion, please? Brian, seconded by Shawnee. Any questions? Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. C items. C1 is the authorization for service contracts. Could I get a motion, please? Lynn, seconded by Shawnee. Any questions? All in favor? Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? C2 is the authorization for special education and nursing contracts. Could I get a motion, please? Carol, seconded by Susan. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, C3 is the authorization for health and welfare services. Could I have a motion? Shawnee, seconded by Susan. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. C4 is the acceptance of the audit reports pertaining to the payroll payout observation. Could I have a motion, please? Lynn, seconded by Susan. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, C5 is the authorization for contracts for federal Part B funds. Could I have a motion? Shawnee, seconded by Susan? Any questions? All in favor? Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, C6 is the authorization for adjustments to budgetary reserves. Could I have a motion? Lynn, seconded by Brian. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, C7 is the authorization for piggybacking with Southampton School District. Could I have a motion? Shawnee, seconded by Susan. Any questions? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, C8 is the authorization for a change order for Long Island Roofing and Repairs Service Corp. contract. Could I have a motion, please? Shawnee, seconded by Susan. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. C9 through 11 can be taken together. They are award of bids. Can I have a motion, please? Shawnee, seconded by Lynn. Any questions? Brian, you have a question.
Dr. Rogers, in 20 seconds or less, could you just give me a little detail on C11, what we're doing with respect to the tennis courts?
Yes, 20 seconds I can do. If you need more than that, I need Mr. Hamilton's help. So the tennis courts have an asphalt surface, but the poles that hold up the net are concrete. So those are two different kinds of materials. So what happens over time is as the ground heaves with frost and the change of weather, the ground affects the concrete differently than it affects the asphalt. And so eventually what happens is the surface breaks up and the poles get out of alignment. So there are a couple of courts that are in pretty rough condition, and the tennis coach doesn't feel like they're really playable for the students. So we did a resurfacing of the tennis courts prior to the pandemic 4 or 5 years ago, and they need another resurfacing again now. So that's the work that's going to be done on the tennis courts. The two new ones are in terrific shape, as you would expect, but some of the other ones that are furthest away from the new courts are in pretty tough shape.
How many courts is it?
Well, there are 6 old courts and 2 new courts. The new courts are not involved. And Greg, just how many of the 6 old courts are involved? All of them. So all 6 of the old courts are going to be touched.
And
Okay. No more questions? All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. C12 is the adoption of grants. Could I have a motion, please? Lynn, seconded by Brian. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and C13 is the authorization of the disposal of broken, surplus, and/or obsolete equipment and/or books. Could I have a motion, please? Shawnee, seconded by Brian. Any questions? Brian?
These are the Chromebooks as part of this, right? And these are the ones we give to that organization. So I've heard of that organization, if it's the one I think, the one that does the recycling and then also hires disabled adults to do the work. It's a wonderful organization. I'm so happy to see it on here.
That is correct. We take the Chromebooks, we harvest them for parts as much as we can, and then we give them to the organizations called eWorks, and they employ disabled adults to do further upcycling of and recycling of the electronic equipment.
Okay. Could I have a motion, please? Susan, seconded by Brian. We have no more questions, right? All in favor? Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, everybody. Motion to adjourn. Okay. Thank you. Have a great night. Thank you, Mr. Stuber, for your presentation tonight and for hanging out with us.